Chapter 23:33. Roar. The instant the dragon's shadow soared into the sky, an earth-shattering dragon roar reverberated in the space and exploded with the power of thunder. Boom! At that moment, the entire absolute shadow dark world shook as if it had been hit by a huge impact. Boom! 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 In the next moment, a series of violent, muffled sounds rang out in the huge dark boundary. Then, the entire boundary began to shake like a small boat in a stormy sea that was about to collapse. What's going on? What's happening inside the boundary? Everyone's eyes trembled when they saw this scene. They had no idea what was happening. Boom! At that moment, the absolute shadow dark world finally could not withstand the powerful impact and collapsed with a loud bang. It turned into an endless power of darkness that surged into the void. QL11 almost at the same time, a huge blood-colored figure rushed out of the darkness like a golden ray of light, cutting through the night sky. Nietion, and I, Jianming, and the others exclaimed in shock when they saw the blood-colored figure clearly. The figure that rushed out was a golden dragon riddled with scars. Who else could it be but Nietion? At this moment, even though Nietion was still in his golden dragon form, the golden light around him was much dimmer than before, replaced by a blood-colored light. There were countless bloody holes on his body. His entire body was riddled with holes, and his flesh was a bloody mess. In particular, there was a 100-meter-long wound on his chest, from which blood flowed continuously. However, the dragon scale protecting his heart was not broken. There was only a sore mark on it. Everyone was completely stunned by the scene in front of them. They looked at Nietion in shock. They could not imagine what he had experienced in the absolute shadow dark world. He's not dead. At that moment, a black-robed figure appeared in the sky and stared at Nietion with a murderous gaze. He seemed to exclaim in surprise. This black-robed figure was Qinyu. Although he tried his best to stop Nietion from breaking through the boundary, he still failed. However, as soon as Nietion broke through the ward, his sword still slashed down. The 100-meter-long wound on Nietion's chest was left by Qinyu's sword. Qinyu had once directly shattered Di Shi's heart-protecting dragon scales with a single sword strike. However, the same sword strike failed to shatter Nietion's dragon scale. From this, it could be seen that Nietion's dragon monarch physique was far stronger than Di Shi's. Qinyu, your vanishing shadow dark world has been broken by me. Nietion stabilized his body, and the dragon energy in his body began to surge. The wounds all over his body began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. As long as the dragon scales protecting the heart were not broken, the body of a divine dragon would recover quickly, no matter how severe the injury was. Nietion, under your dragonized state, you forcefully used the power of the gods and demons. This is a huge blow to your martial body. Qinyu sneered and said, I believe that the current you is already an arrow at the end of its flight, right? Nietion's body rolled a little, and the space was immediately filled with a strong smell of blood. At this moment, he was indeed severely injured. Even his dragon monarch physique was on the verge of collapsing. After all, the dragon energy in his body was not inexhaustible. Nietion. Everyone looked at Nietion with worried eyes, not knowing if the latter could hold on. I don't have much energy left, but it's enough to kill you. Nietion laughed, and the aura of his body skyrocketed again. You still dare to be stubborn when you're at death's door, Qinyu said coldly. The sword aura around his body skyrocketed, and he said coldly, I'll take your life with this sword, divine profundity realm. Jun Chujian could feel the aura of Qinyu's body from afar. His eyes were filled with horror, and he couldn't help but exclaim. Qinyu's sword intent was extremely terrifying and sharp, as if it could break the void with just a sword aura. Such a terrifying sword intent shocked Jun Chujian greatly. He was very sure that Qinyu must be a divine profundity swordsman. He never thought that there would be a divine profundity swordsman in the land of the abandoned. At the same time, Li Guangtongchen looked at Qinyu. He seemed to have noticed something, and his expression became very strange. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he murmured, "So this Ing is—" He didn't finish his sentence, but his eyes flickered with a hint of joy. Ing aura. How could it be? Beside Li Guangtongshan, Granny Qianwan also seemed to have noticed something wrong. She frowned, and her expression became strange. The other people were extremely nervous, and their nerves were stretched to the extreme, and their hearts were in their throats. They knew that the next moment would determine the winner between Nie Tian and Ing Qinyu. Roar! High up in the sky, the golden colossal dragon soared into the sky and roared furiously. The dragon aura around its body skyrocketed, and its golden body was covered with a layer of black energy. That black energy was the divine demon force. This time, not only did Nie Tian use all the remaining dragon aura in his body, but he also forcefully released the divine demon force, which combined with the dragon blood around his body to stimulate the dragon aura and make it even more powerful. Kid, you've gained the recognition of the Raw Star Stone. Ing Qinyu's voice reverberated in the void, and he said, "It's enough to prove that you're not an ordinary martial artist. What I didn't expect was that your body actually nurtured a powerful dragon vein. Given your current strength, ordinary pseudo-sage experts are no match for you. But unfortunately, your opponent is me, Ing Qinyu. You'll soon understand how powerful a divine profundity swordsman is. The divine profundity swordsman is beyond your imagination." A boundlessly violent voice resounded across the 9 heavens, vast and powerful. The aura of the sword intent surrounding Ing Qinyu's body skyrocketed at that instant. The sword aura around his body soared into the sky, spreading over 10,000 meters away. His figure was like a giant sword that could shatter the sky, standing firmly between the heavens and earth, as if it would split the heavens and earth apart with a single swing of his sword aura. High up in the sky, the dragon aura around the golden colossal dragon had expanded to its limit, causing the space to turn misty under the influence of the dragon aura. Nie Tian forcefully unleashed the divine demon force, causing the dragon aura to reach an unprecedented level. Following this, it would be his strongest attack. Kill! In the next instant, Ing Qinyu's voice could be heard. Following his voice, the sword aura around him instantly crumbled like a 10,000 zhang tall mountain, causing the rift to tremble violently. In the sky, a space crack that spanned over a few thousand meters was formed. Bang! A black shadow of a sword over 10,000 meters long descended from the sky, like a waterfall pouring down toward the golden colossal dragon. Roar! Almost at the same time, a deafening dragon roar could be heard as the enormous golden colossal dragon began to move. The dragon aura around it was unleashed, causing the shadow of a golden dragon over 10,000 meters long to appear. Chapter 23:34. Rumble, crack, crack, crack. In the sky, the sound of space being torn could be heard constantly. Terrifying space-time storms rushed out of the space like tornadoes, wreaking havoc in the void. The world was dark, and the terrifying and crazy power constantly collided. The space within hundreds of thousands of meters shook violently as if it was going to collapse at any time. Boom, boom. In the sky, the terrifying black sword shadow and the golden dragon rushed over. They were like the two rulers of the world, and they were about to have a terrifying collision. Oh no, retreat. Li Guang and Tongchun suddenly sensed something at this moment. Their expressions changed, and they cried out, "Everyone go higher. This world is going to collapse." The voice of the 1,000 illusion granny sounded at almost the same time. She was extremely nervous. The auras of Nie Tian and Ing Qinyu were too powerful. The sacred world fragment before them could no longer withstand their power. Moreover, Nie Tian was currently in the body of the golden dragon. The boundless dragon chi around him also greatly weakened the space-time. In fact, it was already a miracle that this piece of land could last until now under the pressure of so many experts. Everyone came to their senses. They moved together and directly flew up into the sky. When the sacred world fragment collapsed, the space would fall into nothingness. In such a space, space-time storms would wreak havoc, and space-time vortexes would devour everything. Even a pseudo-sane expert would find it difficult to survive in such a chaotic space. Everyone rushed up into the sky. The space above was connected to the other sacred world fragments, so it would be a relatively safe area. Boom! At this moment, in the sky, the black sword shadow and the golden dragon finally collided head-on. The space shook and seemed to stop for a moment. In the next moment, an endless amount of energy burst forth, like thousands of sharp blades, rushing in all directions. Crack, crack, crack. In an instant, endless tearing sounds were heard. The surrounding space could no longer withstand the terrifying impact and directly collapsed. Boom, boom, boom. Streaks of space-time storms appeared and directly bombarded the body of the golden dragon, causing bloody wounds. Some of the torn flesh was even directly devoured by the space-time storms. Not good. Nietion felt the huge impact on his body and immediately cried out in alarm. Even his expression was one of fear. On the other side, Ing Qinyu's figure was frantically retreating, but the surrounding spatial storm followed him like a shadow. At this time, the sword shadow in the air had been shattered by the space-time storm. The terrible power exploded in an instant, turning into waves of sword while that raged wildly. Nietion forcefully stabilized his body and lowered his head to look down. The scene that entered his eyes made him extremely shocked. The earth had already been completely torn apart. The ground no longer existed, turning into giant boulders that floated in space. They were currently being mercilessly devoured by the space-time storm. Oh no! Suddenly, Nietion shouted. Zhuizhua and the others seemed to still be underground. When he thought of this, his expression changed. Then he moved and rushed down. Nietion! Everyone in the sky couldn't help but exclaim when they saw that Nietion actually disregarded the impact of the space-time storm and rushed down. They didn't know why Nietion didn't fly up, but instead rushed down. When the sacred world fragment collapsed, the ground below was the first to collapse. Only the sky was the safest. What Nietion was doing right now was no different from courting death. Kid, this game is over. It's time for you to die. And at this time, Ing Qinyu looked at Nietion, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. Then his figure moved, and he violently stabbed out with his sword. Like a black light, it directly attacked towards Nietion. In order to kill Nietion, Ing Qinyu actually rushed over as well. It seemed that he wanted to perish together with Nietion. Nietion's figure rushed down, completely disregarding the space-time storm around him. His body was already dripping with blood. Large pieces of his flesh and dragon scales were torn apart by the space-time storm and instantly devoured. If one looked at his figure from afar, he was already on the verge of collapse. His body was covered in large patches of white wounds that were so deep that bones could be seen. However, he didn't care about all this. His eyes searched the collapsed space, trying to find Zhuizhua and the others. Master Zhuizhua, Elder Ming. At this time, he saw a group of people standing on a huge rock below. It was Zhuizhua and the others. At this time, Zhuizhua and the others relied on Zhuizhua's formation to resist the impact of the space-time storm. Their strength wasn't high. Even Ming Jinyu only had the strength of a half-saint. If a half-saint was exposed to the space-time storm, they would be killed instantly. Nietion saw that the formation around Zhuizhua and the others was already riddled with cracks and was about to collapse at any time. Hold on! With a low roar, Nietion's figure rushed forward. However, at this moment, a huge piece of earth with a radius of 10,000 meters appeared above his body and pressed down on him like a mountain. Ruinable. Nietion swung his dragon tail with great force, shattering the huge chunk of earth. Then, he rushed toward Zhuizhua and the others. Master Zhuizhua! Nietion's figure arrived. His eyes flickered as he looked at Zhuizhua and the others. He was thinking about how to save them. Zhuizhua and the others were too weak. They couldn't withstand the impact of the space-time storm at all. Once they were exposed, they would definitely die. Yunye Ishwa looked at the golden dragon in front of her and couldn't believe her eyes. It was as if she was dreaming. Yes, Master Zhuozhua, quickly enter the 9 extremities. Nye Tian didn't explain anything. After nodding, he released the last bit of dragon chi in his body and forcibly opened up a space. He took out the 9 extremities and let Zhuozhua and the others enter. Okay. Zhuozhua and the others entered the 9 extremities without hesitation. However, at this moment, Ming Jinyu's eyes flickered and he exclaimed, "Watch out!" Before he could finish his sentence, a sharp black sword shadow descended from the sky and landed with a loud bang. Bang! Nye Tian didn't even have time to react before the dragon scale protecting his chest shattered into pieces. His dragon chi was too weak at the moment. Moreover, the dragon scale protecting his chest had already been severely damaged. This time, it couldn't withstand the impact and was directly shattered. Nye Tian suddenly raised his head and looked at the black figure in midair. He didn't expect Ing Qinyu to be so ruthless as to rush down just to kill him. Nye Tian, accept your death obediently. Ing Qinyu sneered and raised the long sword in his hand. Without hesitation, he slashed down with his sword. The sword shadow was like a mountain, sharp as the wind, and full of murderous intent. Nye Tian forcefully opened up a space to prevent Ming Jinyu and the others from being hit by the space-time storm. He had no spare energy to resist Ing Qinyu's attack. In the next instant, a shocking scene took place. Chapter 23:35. Nye Tian's figure was pierced through by the sword. His enormous figure was instantly dyed red with blood. Upon seeing this, Ming Jinyu let out a wail, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. Nye Tian, don't worry about me. Enter the 9 extremities. Nye Tian's divine sense was still conscious as he spoke with great difficulty. Ming Jinyu collected his thoughts and stepped into the 9 extremities. Nye Tian's lips curled into a grin when he saw that the last person had entered the 9 extremities. He showed no sign of fear at that moment. All he had was an icy, murderous intent. Even though his body was pierced through, his aura remained ferocious. Still not dead yet, Ing Qinyu's figure was surrounded by a terrifying ultimate shadow force, which formed an ultimate shadow barrier to protect him from the spatial storm. He fixed his gaze on Nye Tian. He did not expect the latter to survive after being pierced by his sword. He could even sense the murderous intent and battle intent in Nye Tian's eyes. A person who was in a hopeless situation was not showing despair, but battle intent. It was utterly terrifying. You're the ultimate Shadow Hall master, right? Nye Tianling let out a laugh. His enormous figure shuddered as he spoke in a deep voice. You won't be leaving this place today. What a joke. Ing Qinyu let out a hollow laugh and said coldly, Do you really think you can fight me in your current state? I'm not killing you now, because I'm waiting for you to regain your human form, so I can retrieve the Origin Star Stone in your body. The Origin Star Stone is the foundation of the Sacred Realm. It's a joke for a piece of trash like you to have it. Only an expert like me is worthy of owning the Origin Star Stone. The icy voice was filled with extreme insolence. Ing Qinyu's eyes were filled with an icy, murderous intent. He was waiting for the dragon chi in Nye Tian's body to completely disappear, allowing him to regain his human form, so that he could retrieve the Origin Star Stone. He was only interested in Nye Tian for the Origin Star Stone in his body. In his opinion, the Origin Star Stone was the cornerstone of the sacred world. It was a complete waste for it to fall into Nye Tian's hands. In this world, only he, Ing Qinyu, was worthy of owning an Origin Star Stone. Suddenly, Nye Tian let out a cold laugh. Are you really that confident? Ing Qinyu was stunned for a moment. He felt that Nye Tian's smile was very strange, and it actually made him shudder. The next moment, Nye Tian made a shocking move. His body shuddered violently as the dragon chi in his body began to leak out. At the same time, his blood chi surged and filled the air. Boom, boom, boom. Subsequently, The surrounding space was impacted by the dragon chi, and countless space-time storms that were thousands of meters in size were formed surrounding Ing Chinyu. Stinking brat, have you gone mad? In an instant, Ing Chinyu reacted, and he cried out in alarm while his eyes trembled incessantly. Nie Tian ignited his dragon blood and stimulated the dragon chi, causing a great impact on the surrounding space to increase the power of the space-time storms. The space-time here was already collapsing, and now that it was impacted by the dragon chi, the space-time storms became even more terrifying. Nie Tian knew that he no longer had the strength to kill Ing Chinyu, so he had to use the space-time storms to kill Ing Chinyu. However, by doing so, he would perish together with Ing Chinyu. His current state was close to his limit. Igniting his dragon blood was equivalent to exhausting the last of his life force, and releasing the dragon chi would also make him lose the last bit of his strength. At this moment, the terrifying space-time storms in the surroundings could not only kill Ing Chinyu, but also Nie Tian. Ing Chinyu, even if I die, I won't let you live. Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and the dragon blood in his body began to burn even more violently, and the dragon chi overflowed wildly. Boom, boom, boom. The space-time storms in the surroundings became even more terrifying, and were actually as large as 10,000 meters, like a tornado, entrenched in the surroundings. Lunatic, you're a lunatic, Ing Chinyu shouted. He had never thought that Nie Tian would actually do this. Unfortunately, at this moment, it was already impossible for him to escape. The extremely terrifying space-time storms had already surrounded him. Ing Chinyu, you destroyed so many races. You're the real lunatic. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched into a cold smile. The dragon blood and dragon chi in his body had finally been exhausted. His body trembled violently and was rapidly shrinking. With the dragon chi exhausted, he was about to return to his human form. In his human form, Nie Tian could not possibly withstand the space-time storms. The powerful space-time pressure in the surroundings would instantly crush his body. Seeing this scene, Ing Chinyu's eyes lit up with joy, and he exclaimed, "He's returning to his human form." As long as Nie Tian returned to his human form, he would be able to get the raw star stone. Bang! However, at this moment, the vanishing shadow shield around him could no longer withstand the impact of the space-time storms, and with a loud bang, it collapsed. Ing Chinyu immediately came to his senses, and his eyes suddenly trembled, and a look of horror appeared on his face. Although he was a pseudo-sane expert, his body was made of flesh and blood. After all, with the vanishing shadow shield broken, his physical body and martial body were completely unable to withstand the impact of the space-time storms. The moment death befell him, Ing Chinyu shouted, "My raw star stone." His heart was still concerned about the raw star stone. He was only one step away from the raw star stone, but this step would be the end of his life. Nie Tian, we'll meet again. In the next moment, the space-time storms suddenly pressed down on him. Ing Chinyu's eyes trembled, and the corner of his mouth actually raised into a strange smile. Bang! Immediately, his body directly collapsed and turned into a ball of black smoke and disappeared. Almost at the same time, Nie Tian felt that his body had returned to his human form. He felt a heart-wrenching pain all over his body, and the boundless pressure around him was also pressing down on him. "I can't die." A voice struggled in his mind, but he had completely lost control of his body. Boom! The space-time storms suddenly pressed down violently. At this moment of life and death, Nie Tian suddenly felt an endless stream of dragon chi appear, and it forcibly broke through the space-time storms. Nie Tian. At this moment, a mighty voice sounded in his ears. "Brother Di Shi." Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he actually saw a golden figure appear in front of him. It was Di Shi. "I've come at the right time." Di Shi released the dragon chi, which shrouded Nie Tian, and his huge body soared into the sky. Di Shi was also seriously injured, but with the body of the golden dragon, he barely resisted the space-time storms, and his figure dashed out like a golden ray. In just the blink of an eye, Dishi's figure appeared high up in the sky, and his golden body was already dripping with blood. But in the end, he successfully rescued Nietian. Nietian, high up in the sky. Everyone cried out in surprise when they saw Dishi and Nietian return. Nietian stood up with difficulty, and when he saw that everyone was still alive, the corner of his mouth raised into a gratified smile. This earth-shattering battle had destroyed a fragment of the sacred realm. But in the end, the person who survived was still Nietian. However, Nietian was very curious about what Inchinu meant when he said, "We'll meet again," before he died. Chapter 23:36. Nietian thought of Inchinu's last words and could not help but frown. However, he did not continue thinking about it, because he was too weak at the moment. He had reached his limit and was in urgent need of rest. Below them, time and space were still collapsing. The world had already fallen into nothingness and chaos. It was truly the end of the world. Lord Dishi, let's leave this place first. N.I. Jamming looked at Dishi and said solemnly. Everyone glanced at the world below and didn't linger any longer. They all leaped onto Dishi's body and left. The Forsaken Land was formed by countless fragments of the sacred realm. Moreover, every fragment of the sacred realm was independent of each other. They were only connected to each other at the weakest point. The greatest advantage of such a world was that the collapse of one fragment of the sacred realm would not affect another fragment of the sacred realm. Nietian and the rest quickly arrived at another fragment of the sacred realm. They came to a continuous mountain range and found a wide canyon to temporarily stay. In this battle, Nietian and the rest were seriously injured and needed rest. 3 days later, Nietian recovered from his serious injuries. Li Guang Tongchun, Granny Thousand Illusions, and the rest had also more or less recovered. At this moment, Nietian and the rest were standing in the canyon. Indra and Jianqingqi were preparing to leave. Indra, Sword Elder, have you decided to stay in the Forsaken Land to train? Nietian had more or less recovered and asked Indra and Jianqingqi. Although the current Jianqingqi did not remember what Nietian had done, Nietian was still used to calling him Sword Elder. Yes, Jianqingqi nodded and said with a smile, "This place is even vaster than the 9 domains we are in. If not for you, I might never have been able to come here." Nietian smiled faintly and said, "Since you've already made up your mind, I won't stop you. Just be careful." Jianqingqi and Indra smiled faintly and did not stay for long. They turned around and left. Nietian looked at the two figures with a faint smile on his face. It was not strange that Jianqingqi and Sakura had decided to stay in the Forsaken Land. He believed that any martial practitioner from the 9 realms would choose to stay in the Land of the Abandoned. This was a world much vaster than the 9 major realms, and the limits of martial practitioners were also much higher than the 9 major realms. It was no exaggeration to say that a first-rate expert in the Forsaken Land was a peak existence in the 9 major realms. Nietian had only been in the Forsaken Land for a few months, but he had already seen quite a few pseudo-sage powerhouses. From this, it could be seen how powerful the Forsaken Land was. Jianqingqi and Sakura staying in the Forsaken Land would be beneficial to their future growth. Both of them were talented swordsmen, and their achievements in the future would not be any worse than the peak swordsmen of the Forsaken Land. Nietian, it's time for I to leave. Jun Chujian walked over at this moment and said with a smile. However, his smile was filled with unconcealable bitterness. Alliance leader, do you really not want to see Jun ouching? Nietian looked at Jun Chujian and asked with a frown. He had already asked Jun Chujian before, but the latter did not want to see Jun ouching. I won't see her for the time being. Jun Chujian smiled bitterly and said, ouching is still young and weak. There are some things that will be a heavier burden for her if I tell her now. Don't tell her that I'm here. If she hates me, then let her hate me. Nietian frowned and nodded slightly. It could be seen that Jun Chujian had something that was difficult to say. However, since Jun Chujian was unwilling to say it, Nietian did not ask too much. It was better not to see Jun Chujian and Jun ouching at this moment. After that, Jun Chujian bade farewell to Li Guang and Tongchun and left. Shua. Gale Xiao Xiao and the others also took their leave. At this time, there were fewer and fewer people in the canyon. Li Guang, we have to leave too. At this time, the Thousand Illusions granny walked up and said with a faint smile. Beside her stood Rui Qinyu and Yeyuro. It was obvious that she wanted to take Rui Qinyu and Yeyuro with her. Thousand Illusions granny, must you take Rui Qinyu and Yuro with you? Nye Tian frowned. He did not want Rui Qinyu and Yeyuro to leave his side. Kid, with your current strength, do you think it's better for the two girls to follow you or this granny? The Thousand Illusions granny raised her eyes and asked bluntly. Nye Tian was silent for a moment, not knowing what to say. The Thousand Illusions granny's meaning was clear. It was obviously better for Rui Qinyu and Yeyuro to follow her. And Nye Tian also knew that the Thousand Illusions granny's words were not wrong. But he was not sure if Rui Qinyu and Yeyuro were willing to follow the Thousand Illusions granny. Kid, this is what this granny and Li Guang agreed on. This granny will help you, and Royu and Ro will stay by my side. The Thousand Illusions granny saw that Nye Tian did not speak and smiled. You're not thinking of going back on your word, are you? Thousand Illusions granny must be joking. Nye Tian laughed bitterly and shook his head. With my current strength, do I have a right to go back on my word? It's good that you know this. The Thousand Illusions granny laughed and looked at Rui Qinyu and Yeyuro. Ro, I'll give you some time to say your goodbyes. This granny will wait for you outside. As she spoke, the Thousand Illusions granny turned and walked out of the canyon. Li Guang and Tongchun also followed. Ming Jinyu and Mizuhara Kaori also walked out of the canyon, not wanting to disturb Nye Tian and the others. Rui Qinyu came to Nye Tian's side, while Yeyuro walked towards an eye jamming. Nye Tian, I can't always be by your side. To be able to become the Thousand Illusions granny's disciple is my chance. Rui Qinyu looked at Nye Tian and smiled gently. Please believe me. The next time we meet, I will no longer be your burden, but your support. I believe you. Nye Tian nodded slightly and smiled. Indeed, with Rui Qinyu's talent, becoming the Thousand Illusions granny's disciple would be very beneficial to her future development. It was rumored that the rainbow pupils were the most suitable pupils for illusions, and the Thousand Illusions granny was a pinnacle illusionist. QL11 it was the same for Yeyuro. She was a dual attribute cultivator of light and wind. Furthermore, she had the Thousand Mirage seal in her body. She was practically a natural-born illusionist. Perhaps the next time Nye Tian saw the two of them, they would already be top-notch illusionists. A moment later, Nye Tian and the others walked out of the canyon. The Thousand Illusions granny left with Rui Qinyu and Yeyuro. The three of them disappeared in the blink of an eye. Nye Tian couldn't help but feel a little disappointed as he looked in the direction where the three of them disappeared. He could only look forward to the next time they met. Nye Tian, you're also leaving the Forsaken Lands, right? Li Guang and Tongchun looked at Nye Tian and said lightly. Nye Tian nodded and smiled bitterly. If I continue to stay here, I'm afraid I'll be pursued endlessly. It's better to leave as soon as possible. His purpose for coming to the Forsaken Lands had been achieved. Now was the time to leave. Chapter 23:37. When Nye Tian heard Li Guangtongchun's question, he was briefly stunned before his face changed. Ing Qinyu was still alive. This was something that he couldn't figure out. Previously, he had personally witnessed Ing Qinyu being torn apart by the spatial storm. However, before Ing Qinyu died, a weird smile appeared on his face, and he claimed that he would meet Nye Tian again. Senior, I've also been puzzled by your question for a long time. Nye Tian became cold as he narrated the scene before Ing Qinyu's death. It looks like my guess was right. Li Guangtongchun couldn't help smiling when he heard Nye Tian's words. The Hall Master of the Juying Divine Palace truly doesn't die so easily. What do you mean? Nye Tian was briefly stunned before he pursued. Ing Qinyu really isn't dead. Yeah. The corners of Li Guangtongchun's lips curled into a bitter smile. He nodded and said, previously, I suspected that Ing Qinyu's strength was a little weak. He wasn't as strong as I thought. But when he fought with you, I noticed that his aura was fluctuating and changing. Such a change shouldn't appear on a pseudo-sacred realm expert. So I guess that the Ing Chinyu you fought wasn't his main body, but a clone. Clone! When Nye Tian and Ni Jiaming heard Li Guangtanchen's words, they were stunned before they exclaimed, "Clone!" How could they have imagined that the Ing Chinyu from before was just a clone? It was hard to imagine that a clone would be so powerful. When Nye Tian fought with Ing Chinyu, he could clearly sense that the latter's strength was on a higher level than the heavenly evil monarch and Huanqi Lai. But now, Li Guangtanchen was telling him that the Ing Chinyu he fought was just a clone. How could he accept that? If Ing Chinyu's clone was so terrifying, then he couldn't imagine how powerful his main body was. Actually, I was only guessing before this. Li Guangtanchen nodded his head with a smile. But when I told Qianwan about my guess, she also noticed it and had the same doubt in her heart. Now, at the scene you saw before Ing Chinyu died, I'm certain that the Ing Chinyu we saw was only a clone. This, Nye Tian and Ni Jiaming gasped at the same time and were speechless for a long time. Ing Chinyu lived up to his reputation as the lord of the Juying Divine Palace. A mere clone was so terrifying. At that moment, Nye Tian finally understood how terrifying an organization the Juying Temple was. Ni Jiaming, do you know what the limit of Ing Chinyu's strength is? After a moment, Nye Tian became cold and couldn't help but ask Ni Jiaming. Ni Jiaming and Ing Chinyu had known each other for a long time, so he should have a certain understanding of the latter. I don't know. Unexpectedly, Ni Jiaming shook his head and said with a bitter smile, I've only met Ing Chinyu a few times. Regarding this part of the memory, my divine sense is still very vague. Right now, I only have a rough impression of Ing Chinyu. As for how strong this person is, I really don't know. Ni Jiaming was a person who had experienced countless reincarnations. Even though his strength had reached the supreme god realm, he still hadn't completely awakened the memories of his previous life. Therefore, he only had vague impressions of many things. Nye Tian's face grew solemn when he heard Ni Jiaming's words. He even felt that Ing Chinyu's original body was most likely a legendary sage. However, this was only his guess, and he couldn't prove it. Ing Chinyu is a divine, profound swordsman. What we saw was most likely his profound doppelganger. Li Guangtanchen frowned and said in a low voice, Profound doppelganger. Nye Tian was stunned when he heard this name. He only knew that divine sword body realm swordsmen could form soul doppelganger, and the doppelganger's ability was no different from the original body. According to Li Guangtanchen, it seemed that divine profound swordsmen could form profound doppelganger. However, the soul doppelganger of a swordsman was no weaker than the original body. Profound doppelganger was obviously stronger than the soul doppelganger. Could it be that the profound doppelganger was a doppelganger that was stronger than the original body? A doppelganger that was stronger than the original body sounded a little ridiculous. Li Guangtanchen could tell what Nye Tian was thinking. He smiled and said, the profound doppelganger has the same ability as the original body. However, the profound doppelganger is stronger than the soul doppelganger. If the soul doppelganger of a swordsman is destroyed, the foundation of his sword Dao will be damaged, and his sword Dao will fall. However, the destruction of the profound doppelganger will not affect the swordsman's original body. After the profound doppelganger is formed, it is very independent and can do whatever it wants under the control of the original body. The biggest difference between the soul doppelganger and the profound doppelganger is that the soul doppelganger cannot exist without the original body, but the profound doppelganger can. Therefore, the appearance of Ing Chinyu's profound doppelganger doesn't mean that he has been here. But he knows everything about this place. Li Guang and Tong Chun spoke in one breath, their faces involuntarily revealing a look of shock. Ing Chinyu was too cunning. He let the profound doppelganger appear while his original body stayed behind the scenes and controlled everything. More importantly, the profound doppelganger's battle strength was not weaker than the original body. One had to admit that Ing Chinyu was really a cunning old fox. If his original body appeared this time, he might really die in the hands of Nietion. The profound doppelganger is so abnormal. Nietion was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted and said, if a profound swordsman could continuously form profound doppelganger, wouldn't it be heaven-defying? The profound doppelganger was not weaker than the swordsman's original body. To a certain extent, the profound doppelganger's battle strength was even more terrifying than the swordsman's original body. After all, when the swordsman's original body attacked, he would have to worry about something. However, the profound doppelganger was not afraid of death and did not need to worry about anything. If a profound swordsman could continuously form profound doppelganger, wouldn't he be able to challenge countless pseudo-Sacred Realm experts? Li Guangtanshan laughed and said, the profound doppelganger is indeed terrifying, but it's not easy for a profound swordsman to form a profound doppelganger. It would consume a large amount of sword intent, divine consciousness, and blood chi. The death of Ingqinyu's profound doppelganger was a huge blow to him. Oh, Nietion let out a long breath and said with a smile, so that's how it is. If a profound swordsman could form an unlimited number of profound doppelganger, it would be too abnormal. If the strength of the profound doppelganger is the same as the original body, it seems that Ingqinyu's strength has not reached the sage realm. Nietion laughed and said calmly, of course, it's impossible for a sage to appear in this abandoned land. Li Guangtanshan smiled and said, if Ingqinyu was a sage, he wouldn't be so desperate for the raw star stones. Chapter 23:38. Senior, are you all right? Nietion couldn't help but ask when he saw Li Guangtanshan's strange behavior. Jiaming also looked at Li Guangtanshan in confusion, but he didn't speak. So you're the Dragon Rebel clan's lord, Li Guangtanshan said with a faint smile. I didn't expect the Dragon Rebel Saint Lord to still be alive. Do we know each other? Jiaming asked with a frown. Although his memory hadn't fully awakened, he could feel that he and Li Guangtanshan didn't know each other. We don't know each other, but I know a little about the Dragon Rebel clan. Li Guangtanshan smiled faintly. I think that the Jueying Temple came to you because of the Dragon Spring Vein. How do you know? Jiaming asked in surprise. Nietion was also stunned. He looked at Li Guangtanshan strangely. Li Guangtanshan seemed to be very familiar with the Dragon Spring Vein. Li Guangtanshan's gaze swept across Nietion and Jiaming as he said, from the looks of it, the two of you probably don't know the essence of the Dragon Spring Vein. The nature of the Dragon Spring Vein, Nietion and Jiaming exclaimed at the same time. They really didn't know what the Dragon Spring Vein was. But Jiaming already knew that the Jueying Temple had come to the Dragon Rebel clan for the Dragon Spring Vein. For the sake of the Dragon Spring Vein, the Dragon Rebel clan had massacred all the other clans in the 9 realms. They had even destroyed the Divine Dragon clan. The Divine Dragon clan was known as the strongest clan below the Saints. But the Dragon Rebel clan was the Divine Dragon clan's nemesis. But Jiaming hadn't given the Dragon Spring Vein to the Jueying Temple. Instead, he had divided it into 6 parts and given them to the Guardian clans for safekeeping. Even now, the Jueying Temple had yet to obtain the Dragon Spring Vein. The Dragon Spring Vein is the same as the raw star stones. It's a cornerstone of the sacred realm, Li Guangtanshan said, looking at Nietion and Jiaming. A cornerstone of the sacred realm. Nietion and Jiaming exclaimed at the same time, then froze. Neither of them had imagined that the Dragon Spring Vein was also a cornerstone of the sacred world. This was especially true for Nietion. He was even more astonished because there was a sacred world foundation stone in his body, the Origin Star Stone. Who would have thought that the Dragon Spring Vein was actually a cornerstone of the Saint's world? However, what puzzled Nietion was that he had no concept of the sacred world's cornerstone. Based on his guess, the sacred world cornerstone should be an essential item to create a sacred world, and it could maintain the existence of a sacred world. Apart from that, he knew nothing about the foundation stones of the Saint's world. Jiaming was surprised as well. His understanding of the foundation stones of the saint's world paled in comparison to Nyetian. Senior, what exactly is the sacred world cornerstone? Nyetian became cold. He asked, are the dragon spring veins and the origin star stones the same as the foundation of the saint world? The foundation stone of a holy world is the thing that creates and supports a holy world. As for its essence and where it comes from, I don't know either. Li Guangtangshan shook his head with a smile. He looked at Nyetian with shining eyes. Perhaps you'll understand what the origin star stone is when you become the starry sky sacred leader. With that, Li Guangtangshan's eyes flickered. Nyetian, let Jun Ouching out for a moment. I want to see the dragon spring vein in her body. Nyetian had told Li Guangtangshan everything about Jun Ouching in simple terms. Nyetian nodded. He took out the 9 extremities and let Jun Ouching out. Nyetian. Jun Ouching walked out of the 9 extremities. Her expression was much calmer. She had been in the 9 extremities for the past few days, so she had no idea what was happening in the outside world. She's fused with the dragon spring vein. N.I. Jiaming exclaimed the moment he saw Jun Ouching. At that moment, he even thought that he was seeing things. A person without a dragon vein had actually fused with the dragon spring vein. Moreover, Jun Ouching had fused with the largest portion of the dragon spring vein. She had fused with half of the dragon spring vein. N.I. Jiaming couldn't believe it. How had Jun Ouching done it? In the next moment, he suddenly thought of something. His expression changed to one of shock. Jun Ouching had fused with the dragon spring vein. Didn't that mean that she would become an envoy of the divine dragon in the future? This made N.I. Jiaming inexplicably afraid. He could vaguely sense that the shocking chess game he had set up a long time ago was about to usher in an unexpected change. He still hadn't completely remembered what he had done back then. But at that moment, he felt inexplicably worried. It really is the dragon spring vein. Li Guangtangshan's eyes lit up when he saw Jun Ouching. He smiled. Judging from the aura of the dragon spring vein, it is indeed a cornerstone of the sacred world. No wonder the Juying Divine Palace is trying so hard to obtain the dragon spring vein. Nyetian was taken aback, but he immediately understood. Senior, do you mean that the Juying Divine Palace is plundering the sacred world's cornerstones? The origin star stones and the dragon spring vein were both cornerstones of the sacred world. The Juying Divine Palace wanted them both. Clearly, the Juying Divine Palace was collecting the cornerstones of the sacred world. Li Guangtangshan nodded and said, I also know very little about the Juying Temple, but I am very sure that this organization is indeed collecting cornerstones of the sacred world. As for what their purpose is, I don't know either. QL11 said. With that, Li Guangtangshan's eyes flickered as he looked at Jun Ouching. He smiled. Judging from the aura of the dragon spring vein, it should be a supporting cornerstone. Supporting cornerstone? Nyetian and N.I. Jiaming were stunned at the same time. They had strange expressions, not understanding what a supporting cornerstone meant. Could the sacred world's cornerstones be different? Li Guangtangshan smiled and said, the support of a saint's world is made up of a main foundation stone and several supporting foundations. The main and supporting cornerstones support a sacred world together. For a sacred world, the main cornerstone is indispensable. The supporting cornerstones are slightly weaker. But if the sacred world does not have a supporting cornerstone, it will be unstable. With that, Li Guangtangshan looked at Nyetian. The origin star stones are a main cornerstone, while the dragon spring vein is a supporting cornerstone. I see. Nyetian and N.I. Jiaming nodded at the same time, understanding a little. Judging from a main and supporting cornerstones, the origin star stones were much stronger than the dragon spring vein. At that moment, Nyetian had a guess. Did the origin star stones and the dragon spring vein come from the same sacred world? If the origin star stones were the main cornerstone of the star sacred world, then could the dragon spring vein be a supporting cornerstone? If that was the case, then there must be other supporting cornerstones in the star sacred world. But where were they? As far as I know, the Juying Shrine is also searching for something other than the origin star stones and the dragon spring vein. Li Guangtangshan said again, his eyes shining with a sharp light. "What is it?" Nietian and Ni Jiaming asked at the same time, their eyes blazing. "The 9 great origins," Li Guangtongchen said in a low voice. Upon hearing these words, Nietian's expression flickered, and his expression froze. 9 origins? There were currently 2 kinds of origins in his body. The earth origin, the vein of the earth, and the darkness heart, the darkness origin. Chapter 2339. Hearing Li Guangtongchen suddenly mention the 9 great sources, Nietian couldn't help but be stunned. He had never imagined that the people of the Juying Shrine would be searching for the 9 great sources. The people of the Juying Shrine were searching for raw star stones and dragon spring veins. These 2 things were the foundation stones of the holy world. Could it be that the 9 great sources were also the foundation stones of the holy world? Nietian didn't know what the foundation stones of the holy world were, so it wasn't strange that the 9 great sources were the foundation stones of the holy world. QL11 at that moment, Li Guangtongchen turned to Nietian and asked, "Nietian, you have 2 kinds of origin power within you, right?" "Yes, the earth source and the darkness source." Nietian nodded and didn't hide anything. "But these 2 source powers are not complete." Li Guangtongchen looked at Nietian and frowned deeply. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. "Senior, if the Juying Shrine is searching for the 9 great sources, are the 9 great sources also the foundation stones of the holy world?" Nietian couldn't help but ask, puzzled. "I don't know either." Li Guangtongchen shook his head slightly and sighed softly. He seemed to think of something and said, "It is said that the Juying Shrine once sent the 9 great clans to the 9 great domains to search for the 9 great sources." HM? Nietian's eyes narrowed when he heard Li Guangtongchen's words. His expression changed instantly. The Juying Shrine had sent the 9 great clans to search for the 9 great sources. This news was very shocking to Nietian. He had a shocking guess. The 9 great clans that Li Guangtongchen spoke of were most likely the 9 great clans of the 9 great domains of the 9 great domains. Before, Nietian had noticed that the 9 great clans of the 9 great domains seemed to have a very close connection with the 9 great sources. Nietian had an earth vein source in his body, so he had been hunted down by the Zhou family, one of the 9 great clans. As for the Xinyuan family, he had met another of the 9 great clans. The swordsman of this family, Xinyuan Yinsong, was someone who had fused with the origin of wind, the storm pole. Moreover, the Qiwu clan of the 9 great clans had a close relationship with the darkness origin source. Jian Qingqi was a member of the Jian family and had once fused with the fire origin power. Deducing from this, perhaps the other aristocratic families corresponded to other origin powers. The more Nietian thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. At this moment, he thought of something else. When Ing Qinyu had first seen him, he had told him that he was from the Nye clan of the 9 realms. Putting all the information together, Nietian was almost certain that the 9 great clans of creation were the 9 great clans that the Juying Shrine had sent back then. "Nietian, are you okay?" Li Guangtongchen couldn't help but ask when he saw Nietian's strange expression. "I'm fine." Nietian waved his hand and calmed down a little. He didn't voice out his guesses. He wanted to solve all the mysteries himself. "Nietian, if the Juying Shrine is looking for the 9 great origins." Li Guangtongchen frowned and said, "This means that the 9 great origins are very important to them. After you return to the 9 realms, if possible, find a way to collect the 9 great origins." Nietian nodded. Li Guangtongchen was thinking the same thing as him. The things that the Juying Shrine wanted were definitely good things. How could Nietian let them go? "Senior, will you continue to stay in the abandoned land?" Nietian asked Li Guangtongchen. "I will stay here and investigate the Juying Shrine. Before you return, I will do my best to find out why the Juying Shrine is collecting the sacred world foundation stones." Li Guangtongchen nodded. Of course, he wouldn't return to the 9 realms with Nietian. As I had said before, Nietian's growth depended on himself. Too much interference from outsiders would only make Nietian weaker. And I jamming, what about you? What do you plan to do next? Tian nodded and asked an I jamming. I will stay here and continue to look for other dragon spring veins. And I jamming smiled bitterly and said, I did a lot of wrong things back then. I must find a way to make up for it. Tian nodded with a smile and said, I hope that the next time we meet, I will be able to see a complete dragon rebel Saint Lord. I hope so. And I jamming smiled as well. He was even more eager to fully awaken the memories of his previous life. Tian, how do you feel now? And I jamming seemed to think of something and suddenly asked. Tian's eyes flickered when he heard N.I. Jamming's question. He frowned and said, I have almost recovered. There is nothing wrong with my martial body. I don't know why, but the dragon vein seal in my body has disappeared. So that's the case. N.I. Jamming's eyes trembled. He already knew that something like this would happen to Tian. He said with a serious expression, the Dragon Emperor of the Golden Dragons has completely disappeared from this world. What do you mean? Tian was stunned and confused. N.I. Jamming said in a deep voice, your dragonification was actually stimulated by the Dragon Emperor's soul. That's why you completely unleashed the power of the Dragon Vein Seal and inherited the Dragon Emperor's power. But the combination of the Dragon Soul and the Dragon Body is an irreversible process. When the Dragon Emperor's Dragon Chi is completely consumed, the Dragon Emperor's soul and the Dragon Vein Seal will disappear together. So your dragonification was actually the last time the Dragon Emperor showed up. Tian frowned and suddenly thought of a scene. When Shi saw his dragonified body and realized that he was Tian instead of the Dragon Emperor, he immediately shed tears. At that time, Shi already knew that it was the last time he saw the Dragon Emperor. Tian did not expect that his dragonification would come at the cost of the Dragon Emperor's complete disappearance. At this moment, his heart was very heavy. Tian, in that situation, you and I had no choice. Releasing the Dragon Emperor's power was our only chance. N.I. Jamming looked at Tian and said in a deep voice, the Dragon Emperor's disappearance is already destined. It's just a matter of time. His dragon soul has been imprisoned in the Spirit Dragon Emperor ring for too long. Even the Dragon Spring Vein can't resurrect him. I have already explained this matter to Lord Shi. You don't have to feel guilty. Tian nodded bitterly and felt a little better. The disappearance of the Dragon Vein Seal also meant that Tian would never be able to dragonify again. He would not be able to use that almost heaven-defying power again. But at this time, the person who was the most heartbroken was not Tian, but Shi. N.I. Jamming, is Big Brother Shi's injury okay? Suddenly thinking of Shi, Tian could not help but ask. N.I. Jamming let Shi leave 3 days ago. No one knew where he went. Lord Shi's heart-protecting dragon scale was broken, and he was seriously injured. N.I. Jamming nodded slightly and said, but he has already merged with the Qilint's precious blood. As long as he recuperates for a period of time, the heart-protecting dragon scale will heal. Qilint's precious blood. Tian was stunned, and his eyes could not help but tremble. The Qilint's precious blood was a sacred item of the Dragon Rebel clan. N.I. Jamming actually let Shi merge with the Qilint's precious blood. Perhaps N.I. Jamming felt guilty towards the Dragon clan. Shi merging with the Qilint's precious blood was a kind of compensation. Chapter 2340. I'm leaving now. Tian's gaze swept across Li Guang Tongchen and N.I. Jamming as he said with a faint smile. After confirming that Shi was safe, he was completely relieved. It was time to leave the land of the Forsaken. Tian had benefited a lot from this trip to the land of the Forsaken. It wasn't just the improvement of his strength. More importantly, his horizons were much broader than before. In the past, the only top experts he had ever met were peak paramount gods. But now, he had seen many pseudo-saint experts. In fact, he had even fought against a pseudo-sage expert and nearly killed him. Such a magnificent feat wasn't something an ordinary person could achieve. Tian didn't linger. He left with Ming Jinyu and the others. Jun Aoqing and Tian left together for the Nine Realms. There were too many things Jun Aoqing didn't want to mention in the land of the Forsaken. More importantly, she wasn't safe in the land of the Forsaken. 3 days later, in the god exclusion zone of the Nine Realms, two figures appeared in the sky above the demon ceiling mountain range. It was Nietion and Junouching. After leaving the land of the Forsaken, they first returned to the Nine Realms. They stayed there for a few days before returning to the Nine Realms. Nietion had many things on his mind. He didn't have much time, so he had to make full use of it. Nietion, is this the world you live in? Junouching looked around and sensed the aura in the space. She couldn't help but frown and ask. She could clearly sense that the aura in the space was much weaker than in the land of the Forsaken. It was even weaker than the Nine-Li Demon Realm. Yes, Nietion nodded and said with a faint smile, now you should know how amazing it is for me to have such strength in a world like this. Are you saying that you're a genius? Junouching smiled lightly, her eyes sparkling. After a few days, she had recovered a lot. Her girlish nature would show from time to time. Am I not a genius? Nietion asked and laughed. After going through the Nine Realms, the Jili Demon Realm, the Abandoned Land, and other different worlds, Nietion deeply felt the importance of the power system in every world. In terms of talent, the martial practitioners of the Nine Major Realms weren't inferior to the martial practitioners of the Nine-Li Demon Realm or the Forsaken Land. However, the overall strength of the martial practitioners of the Nine Realms was much weaker than that of the other two realms. This was not a problem of a martial artist's talent, but the limitations of the world they lived in. The peak experts of the Nine Major Realms couldn't even reach the half-step Saint Realm, while the peak experts of the Abandoned Land were pseudo-Saint Realm experts who were infinitely close to becoming saints. The reason why there was such a gap was because of the difference in the power systems of the two worlds. If the top geniuses of the Nine Major Realms entered the Forsaken Land, they would also be able to reach the peak. Ao Qing, let's enter the Demon Ceiling City first. Nietion smiled lightly and prepared to enter the Demon Ceiling City. He was worried about Cher and the Nine Origins, so he wanted to inquire about some information in the Demon Ceiling City. The first thing that came to Nietion's mind when it came to inquiring about information was the inescapable net. An inescapable net that could penetrate every nook and cranny could obtain any information from there. However, at this moment, Junouching's expression suddenly changed, and she looked down at the mountain range below. There's someone down there. QL11? Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he sensed something, and his expression also changed. At the same time, in the mountain range below, an azure-robed figure was running wildly in the forest with several wounds on his body, blood flowing wildly. Behind this figure were dozens of martial practitioners in black, madly chasing after him. Boom, boom, boom. Several attacks came crashing down, and the trees and rocks were directly shattered. Even the ground was torn open, creating deep ravines. These martial practitioners in black were all paramount god martial artists, and their joint attacks were powerful. Damn it! The azure-robed figure growled. Feeling the terrifying attacks coming, he turned around and punched out. Boom! There was a violent explosion in the air, and the azure-robed figure was directly sent flying, smashing through countless huge trees. You can't escape, give up resisting. A cold and stern voice sounded, and a man in black rushed out, directly slashing down with a saber. The terrifying saber radiance surged for thousands of meters, heading straight for the azure-robed figure. The azure-robed martial artist had not yet stabilized himself, and he had no time to resist at all. His expression suddenly changed, revealing a look of horror. If this saber fell, the azure-robed martial artist would definitely end up dead. Boom! However, at this moment, in the void, a sword shadow fell from the sky and landed with a loud bang, like a giant that could support the heavens and the earth, directly smashing the saber shadow in the air into pieces. When the sword shadow landed, it was like a heavenly pillar upside down on the ground, but it was still able to maintain its sword intent, and at the same time, it released an extremely fierce aura. What a strong sword intent! The dozens of martial practitioners in black were shocked by the sudden scene, and their expressions were filled with horror. The fear in their hearts was written on their faces. They had never imagined that a swordsman's sword intent could be so strong that it didn't dissipate, as if it were a giant, solid sword. This kind of incomparably shocking power stunned them, and they didn't dare to move forward. Scram! Then, a powerful voice rang out from the void like a clap of thunder, resounding in the ears of the martial practitioners in black. The martial practitioners in black looked up into the sky, and as far as their eyes could see, they saw two young faces. "How is this possible?" they cried out in shock. Never in a million years could they have imagined that the people in front of them would be so young. The people they saw were none other than Nietian and Junouching. "I told you to scram. Didn't you hear me?" Nietian's eyes flashed with killing intent as he spoke again, and a violent killing intent surged around him. It was extremely terrifying. The martial practitioners in black could sense the sharp killing intent, and their eyes were filled with shock. When they sensed Nietian's strength, they were completely dumbfounded. They couldn't believe that this young martial practitioner had the strength of a mid-stage paramount god. How is this possible? Nietian looked very young, but his actual age was definitely under 1,000 years old. In the 9 major realms, those who could step into the paramount god realm before the age of 10,000 were peak-level geniuses. Mid-stage paramount god realm martial practitioners under 1,000 years old were simply unheard of. However, these martial practitioners in black didn't seem to want to leave just like that. One of the martial practitioners in the lead mustered up 120% of his courage, stepped forward, looked at Nietian, and said in a loud voice, "We're from Enai. This matter has nothing to do with you, sir. Please don't interfere." Enai. When Nietian heard these 2 words, his lips curled into a cold, killing intent, and he said indifferently, "It's really a small world for enemies." Enai was, of course, no stranger to Nietian. It was one of the 3 most mysterious organizations in the 9 major realms, and was as famous as the inescapable net and the 1,000 Feathers Tower. More importantly, Nietian had almost died at the hands of those who possessed the reverse scale several times. Chapter 2341. Sensing that Nietian's killing intent had suddenly intensified, the black-clothed cultivator couldn't help but tremble, unable to hide the shock in his eyes. But he still kept his cool and said bravely, "I'm sure you're familiar with the name Enai. Even if you're strong, you wouldn't want to provoke a powerful enemy. You talk too much." Nietian stared at the black-clothed man coldly, and the corner of his mouth twitched into a cold, murderous smile. "Sir, you're going to..." The black-clothed man froze for a moment, and then opened his mouth to speak. But before he could finish a sentence, he felt a cold sensation on his neck, and then blood sprayed out of his mouth, and his head flew into the air. The black-clothed cultivator didn't have time to react, and was instantly decapitated. The other black-clothed cultivators all gasped, their faces as pale as paper, and their bodies trembled. The black-clothed cultivator who had just died was an early-stage paramount god, and his battle prowess was terrifying. But in front of Nietian, he couldn't fight back at all. In fact, no one even saw when Nietian unleashed his sword intent. Run! The next moment, all the black-clothed cultivators came to their senses and immediately turned to flee. "I gave you a chance to leave, but you didn't cherish it. Now it's too late." Nietian stared at all the black-clothed cultivators, his eyes cold and murderous. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword shadow on the ground trembled, and then split into dozens of sword shadows, whistling through the air. Dozens of black-clothed cultivators didn't have time to fight back, and were instantly crushed and killed. These dozens of people from Enai were all early-stage paramount gods, and weren't weak at all. But unfortunately, their opponent was Nietian. Nietian was now a mid-stage paramount god, and had reached the level of a mid-stage paramount god. His battle prowess was even more terrifying than that of a peak paramount god. As far as he was concerned, early paramount gods were nothing more than trash. After killing all the black-clothed men, Nietion's figure flashed and landed beside the cultivator in green. You? Who are you? The cultivator in green asked in a quavering voice as he looked at Nietion with a horrified expression. Nietion looked at the person in front of him and frowned. Although this green-clothed martial artist was dressed in male attire, her voice, expression, and exquisite facial features clearly revealed that she was a woman. Nietion didn't say anything. He just took a step forward and prepared to treat the other party's injuries. You, what are you doing? Don't come over. The green-clothed girl was quite frightened and shouted loudly. Nietion laughed and said, Little girl, do you think you have the ability to resist if I want to do something? You know I'm a woman? The girl in green was stunned for a moment, her face full of surprise. Don't move. Nietion didn't want to waste any time. He gathered the power of the earth vein source in his palm and sent it into the green-robed young lady's body. At that instant, Nietion suddenly sensed an unusually familiar aura from the young lady, the god-sealing fetus. In the next moment, his expression changed as he exclaimed in his heart. He didn't expect the girl's body to contain the aura of the god-sealing fetus. The green-clothed girl's expression improved after receiving the energy from the earth vein source. She couldn't help but ask when she saw Nietion's astonished expression, What's wrong? Nietion, let's go. At this time, June Ouching's figure arrived. She glanced at Nietion and seemed a little unhappy as she said indifferently, Wait a minute. Nietion frowned as he fixed his gaze on the green-clothed girl and asked, You're from the Nye clan? How did you know? The green-clothed girl was startled and asked, She's indeed from Nietion's clan. Nietion exclaimed in his heart as a smile appeared on his face. This girl had the god-sealing fetus, so she was obviously from the Nye clan. Nietion really didn't expect that his unintentional action would save someone from his own clan. What's your name? Nietion asked after some thought. Nie Qingwan. Nie Qingwan hesitated for a moment, but finally said her name. How old are you? Nietion's eyes flashed with shock as he scanned Nie Qingwan's body with his divine sense. 21. Nie Qingwan said with a trembling voice, as if she was a little afraid of Nietion. 21 years old. Peak Lord-level strength. Nietion's eyes trembled with shock. He had already sensed that Nie Qingwan's strength was peak Lord level. A 21-year-old peak Lord-level martial artist was a terrifying existence. Moreover, Nietion sensed that Nie Qingwan should be able to step into the paramount god realm very soon. This caused him to stiffen. In the past, Nietion's father, Nie Fenghua, was already a peak monster if he could step into the paramount god realm before the age of 10,000. What kind of monster was this girl in front of him? The word monster was no longer enough to describe such a person. She should be called a monster. Nietion couldn't imagine that the Nye clan had produced such a terrifying genius. Nie Qingwan's strength was peak Lord level, but she was still able to hold on until now under the pursuit of dozens of paramount god martial artists. Her combat strength was definitely stronger than ordinary early-stage paramount god martial artists. In the 9 major realms, it was unimaginable to reach such heights at such a young age. At this moment, Nietion became cold. He unfolded the holographic divine glyphs and carefully sensed Nie Qingwan's aura. He vaguely sensed a very strange aura on Nie Qingwan's body. This aura was incomparably holy, majestic, and very terrifying. Beginning light realm. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded. She was so shocked that she almost screamed. This little girl has merged with the beginning light realm. Beginning light realm? Nietion was stunned, and his expression froze. He didn't know what the beginning light realm was. Nietion, the power in this little girl's body, is the light source, the beginning light realm. Fat Cat exclaimed again, extremely happy. Light source. When Nietion heard these words, his eyes suddenly trembled, and he almost screamed. So the beginning light realm was the light source. He never imagined that Nie Qingwan would actually fuse with the power of light source. The next moment, Nietion immediately thought of something. His eyes became extremely hot, and his heart was in turmoil. The light source, the Nye clan. My guess was right. Nie Qingwan was a member of the Nie clan, and her body had merged with the light source. This coincided with Nie Tian's previous guess. Li Guang Tongshun said that the Jueying Palace had sent out the 9 great clans to search for the 9 great origins. Nie Tian guessed that the 9 great clans that Li Guang Tongshun mentioned were most likely the 9 great clans of the Genesis era. At this moment, he saw Nie Qingwan, who had the light source. This made him even more convinced that his guess was right. Chapter 23:42. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. Nie Tian was extremely excited, and his eyes sparkled. The 9 great aristocratic families corresponded to the 9 great origins. Nie Tian was very sure of this. Moreover, he had already confirmed the relationship between several of the aristocratic families and the 9 great origins. The Chiwu family corresponded to the dark origin. The Nie family corresponded to the light origin. The Xinyuan family corresponded to the wind origin. The Zhou family corresponded to the earth origin, and the Jian family corresponded to the fire origin. Among the 9 great origins, there was the thunder origin, water origin, wood origin, and metal origin. According to what Nie Tian knew, the other 9 aristocratic families included the Jiang family, Yu family, Guiwu family, and Nangong family. Without a doubt, the remaining 4 aristocratic families corresponded to the remaining 4 origins. The 9 great aristocratic families had created the prosperity of the 9 domains, but their purpose in coming to the 9 domains was to find the 9 great origins. Nie Tian's body had merged with the earth origin power, so he had been hunted by the Zhou family head. He had once asked his grandfather, Nie Dao, why the Zhou family valued the earth origin so much. Nie Dao clearly knew something, but he did not explain it to Nie Tian. He only said that there were some things that only the heads of the 9 aristocratic families were qualified to know. Nie Tian guessed that what Nie Dao was hiding was most likely the matter of finding the 9 great origins. After understanding everything, Nie Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and looked at Nie Qingwan with a frown. Nie Qingwan, why are you here? Nie Qingwan was a member of the Nie family. Her talent was abnormally monstrous, and her body had merged with the light origin power. One could guess that her status in the Nie family must be very high. Such a large aristocratic family, like the Nie family, would absolutely not allow a direct descendant to take risks alone. Nie Qingwan appeared here alone. She had almost died just now, and no one had helped her. Therefore, there were no powerhouses by her side to protect her. Nie Tian was very curious why Nie Qingwan would appear here alone. This is my own matter. Nie Qingwan was stunned for a moment and said, even if you saved me, I can't tell you everything. Nie Tian smiled faintly and glanced at Nie Qingwan. He guessed that this little girl most likely snuck out on her own. Otherwise, there would be no need for her to disguise herself as a man. Nie Tian, she is no longer in danger. Let's go. Jun Ouching, who was waiting impatiently at the side, said snappily, your name is Nie Tian, also surnamed Nie? Nie Qingwan was stunned for a moment and suddenly looked at Nie Tian. She seemed to understand something and said with a look of sudden realization, I know. You must be from the Wind and Cloud Alliance. You've been following me in secret, haven't you? Follow you. Nie Tian smiled speechlessly. He immediately knew what Nie Qingwan was thinking. Nie Qingwan must have thought of Nie Tian as someone who was secretly protecting her. It was a pity that Nie Tian was just passing by and took action in passing. Nie Tian, I'm warning you. Before Nie Tian could speak, Nie Qingwan's pretty face darkened and said, from now on, you are not allowed to follow me. Do you understand? With that, Nie Qingwan directly turned and left, completely ignoring Nie Tian's expression. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He looked at the direction where Nie Qingwan disappeared and couldn't help but feel a little worried. Although Nie Qingwan's strength was not considered weak, if she was alone, it would definitely be very dangerous. The reason why the Ni Lin people would target her was most likely because of the light origin in her body. Moreover, Nie Tian was currently investigating the 9 great origins. Ouching, let's follow her. Thinking of this, Nie Tian nodded slightly and prepared to secretly follow her. Why do you want to follow her? Jun Aoqing was obviously a little unhappy and asked with a sullen face. In fact, she was already a little unhappy when Nie Tian had spoken to Nie Qingwan. She is from my clan. If I'm not wrong, she should be considered my clan sister, Nie Tian said with a smile. She is your sister? Jun Aoqing couldn't help but tremble when she heard Nie Tian's explanation. There was an unconcealable joy in her eyes. I think so. Nie Tian nodded. Although Nie Qingwan was from the Nie family, Nie Tian wasn't sure that this girl was of the same generation as him. Yes, we will follow her and secretly protect her. Jun Aoqing nodded heavily and readily agreed. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He couldn't understand why Jun Aoqing's attitude had changed so quickly. He didn't think too much and directly followed her. The two used Jun Aoqing's space-time sword shadow to hide in the void and secretly followed Nie Qingwan. After leaving the Demon Sealing Mountain Range, Nie Qingwan went directly to the Demon Sealing City. The Demon Sealing City was one of the 3 main cities in the God Zone. It had a lot of people. After entering the city, Nie Tian watched Nie Qingwan more cautiously. Nie Qingwan entered the city without any purpose. She just wandered around. Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing followed closely behind Nie Qingwan, maintaining a distance of about 100 meters so that she wouldn't notice them. Nie Qingwan seemed to be tired of wandering and turned into an alley. Just then, Nie Tian suddenly sensed something and his eyes narrowed. Jun Aoqing also sensed something and looked at Nie Tian. She transmitted her voice to ask, "There are other people following us." "Oh no." Nie Tian frowned, and his expression suddenly changed. He sensed that dozens of powerful auras had appeared all around him, and they were secretly approaching him. Among them, there was an extremely powerful aura. It should be a peak paramount god expert. Take her away from here immediately. Nie Tian made a prompt decision. His figure flashed and appeared behind Nie Qingwan. "Stalker, you finally showed yourself." Nie Qingwan laughed at this moment, but when she turned around and saw Nie Tian, she was surprised and said, "How come it's you?" It turned out that Nie Qingwan had already sensed someone was following them. She came to this alley to lure the stalker out, but to her surprise, the person behind her turned out to be Nie Tian. "Follow me." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He wanted to take Nie Qingwan away. "Can you leave?" But before he could finish speaking, a low and murderous voice came from high up in the sky. Boom! Then, a strange invisible force fell from the sky and directly enveloped the space within tens of thousands of meters. Barrier. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment and immediately realized that the other party had set up a barrier in the space. The next moment, dozens of martial artists in black appeared in midair, staring coldly at Nie Tian and the others. Who are they? Nie Qingwan looked up at the men in black in midair, her little face full of horror. She had no idea what was going on. Damn it! Nie Tian ignored her. His face was gloomy and his eyes swept across the men in black. Then his eyes locked on a demon-faced martial artist. His eyes narrowed and he said coldly, "It's you." Chapter 2343. The Evil Soul Remnant. Nie Tian stared at the ghost mask cultivator and uttered his name. He did not expect to meet an old rival here. The Evil Soul Remnant of the 13 Thorns of the Forbidden Scale. Nie Tian and the Evil Soul Remnant had fought a few times before. During the Evil Peak Sword competition, they had fought for a short time. Later on, they fought again. Although the Evil Soul Remnant had failed to kill Nie Tian twice, Nie Tian did not manage to kill it either. Nie Tian, I didn't expect to see you here. The Evil Soul Remnant smiled coldly and said in a deep voice, "What a pleasant surprise." It is a pleasant surprise, but whether you will be surprised or frightened is still up for debate. Nie Tianling smiled coldly, the corner of his lips curling into a cold, murderous intent. He was not afraid, even if he was surrounded by dozens of Forbidden Scale assassins. Nie Tian, your strength has indeed improved tremendously, but you are now trapped in the adverse cold barrier. How much of your strength can you display? The Evil Soul Remnant grinned evilly, its eyes filled with malice. Nietion squinted his eyes and tried to circulate the yuan meridians in his body. To his surprise, his yuan meridians were being suppressed by the evil cold force and were not circulating smoothly. He could even feel that his blood flow had slowed down under the suppression of the evil cold energy. This adverse cold barrier was indeed powerful. It could even suppress the circulation of the sovereign dragon meridians. Attack! The evil soul remnant did not wait any longer. It sneered and roared. Yes. The dozens of Forbidden Scale assassins responded in unison. They moved in unison and attacked Nietion. No, Nieqingwan had never seen such a situation before. She screamed when she felt the overwhelming pressure. Nietion was not afraid at all. The sword aura around him surged, and he slashed with his sword. The sword intent surged, and a terrifying sword shadow rose into the sky. Kaboom! In the next moment, a terrifying collision occurred. Nietion's sword shadow was incomparably violent, and it instantly broke the joint attack of the dozens of Forbidden Scale assassins. In the void, there were heart-wrenching wails, and dozens of figures were directly sent flying. There were even weaker warriors whose bodies directly exploded under the impact of the sword intent, and blood splattered everywhere. With a single sword strike, Nietion had not only broken the joint attack of dozens of Forbidden Scale assassins, but had also severely injured them in the blink of an eye. How is this possible? The sudden turn of events stunned the evil soul remnant, and an unconcealable fear appeared in its eyes. He had never expected Nietion's strength to have reached such an astonishing level. Dozens of Middle Paramount gods had joined forces, yet they couldn't even withstand a single sword strike from Nietion. Nietion was only a Middle Paramount god, and he was being suppressed by the defying cold aegis. How could a sword strike be so powerful? What do you think? Nietion laughed coldly, his attitude incomparably arrogant. The phantasm's soul has been destroyed. Are you happy or terrified now? His 9 dragon veins were indeed suppressed by the inverse cold boundary, but he didn't use the power of the dragon veins at all. Instead, he used the power of the stars. The power of the stars could not be suppressed by any other power. Was there any power in the world powerful enough to suppress the main foundation of a saint's world? Nietion, how could you be so? The evil soul's eyes trembled, and it was too nervous to finish the word powerful. Just a few months ago, Nietion's strength was about the same as his. But now, Nietion's strength absolutely crushed his. But how was this possible? A few months' time was just a snap of a finger to deity realm martial artists. How could Nietion's strength increase so quickly? This completely overturned the evil soul remnant's understanding of martial arts. Nieqingwan was also stunned. Nietion was so young, but his strength was too terrifying. He was even stronger than the elders of the Nie family. But how old was Nietion? How could he be so strong? Is there such a strong person in the Wind and Cloud Alliance? Nieqingwan was puzzled. This was the first time she felt that someone was more monstrous than her. At this moment, a cold smile appeared on Nietion's face as he looked at the phantasm soul and the other man. It's your turn now. After one move, there were only 2 people left in the reverse scale. One was the evil soul remnant, and the other was a black-clothed and masked martial artist. The black-clothed martial artist's aura was even stronger than the evil soul remnant's. His strength was at the peak of deity realm. One could guess that this person's position in the reverse scale was not low. The reverse scale had sent out so many experts just for Nieqingwan. They must have come for the light element origin. Brat, your insolence ends here, the black-clothed martial artist said coldly. Then his figure moved. The atmosphere in the space suddenly became sinister and cold. Nietion's eyes narrowed. He immediately understood that the inverse cold boundary in the space was set up by the black-clothed martial artist. Go to hell. The black-clothed martial artist's aura rose to the extreme. He roared and slammed his palm down. The majestic palm energy shook the void and blasted towards Nietion. Nietion's eyes were as calm as still water. There was no fear in his eyes. His opponent was strong, but Nietion was not weak either. However, before Nietion could make his move, a cold and stern voice came from the sky. "You're the one who should die." Boom! Almost at the moment when the murderous voice resounded, space suddenly shook, and then a sword shadow appeared like a ghost. Bang! The next moment, there was a muffled sound in the air. The black-clothed martial artist didn't have time to react. He didn't even have time to scream. He was sent flying and exploded into a pool of blood in the air. Nietion's expression flickered with astonishment as he saw this. What? The evil soul took a deep breath in, and its eyes were filled with terror. The mask on its face was shaking uncontrollably. He couldn't believe his eyes. His companion had died just like that. His death was swift and sudden. Surprisingly, the person who had attacked was not Nietion, but a young girl who seemed to be in her teens. June Ouching's strength is so terrifying. Nietion stared at June Ouching in shock. The person who had killed the black-clothed martial artist was none other than June Ouching. Nietion had forgotten that June Ouching had awakened the Hell Ghost Meridian, which was the legendary Khanate martial meridian. Furthermore, June Ouching was a late-stage paramount god and had reached the pinnacle of sword and martial arts. Even the current Nietion wasn't sure if he could defeat June Ouching. The death of the black-clothed martial artist caused the defying cold barrier to shatter. Looking at the phantasm soul, the corner of Nietion's mouth twitched as he smiled coldly. "Do you think you'll be able to escape this time?" Previously, the evil soul remnant had managed to escape from Nietion on several occasions. But this time, he wouldn't be so lucky. The evil soul remnant's eyes flickered, and he froze. He won't be able to escape. However, he won't die by your hands. Instead, he will die by my hands. However, at that moment, an eerie voice rang out in the sky. QL11 Nietion's expression flickered, and he looked up into the sky. A very familiar figure appeared in his line of sight. Lian Jiufeng. When Nietion saw Lian Jiufeng's face, he couldn't help but gasp. Lian Jiufeng. Chapter 2344. Nietion looked at Lian Jiufeng and frowned. His expression was ugly. Lian Jiufeng was a very difficult person to deal with. Every time he appeared, nothing good would come out of it. To Nietion, he was an unwelcome guest. Promise. Nietion's eyes focused when he heard Lian Jiufeng's words and asked. At this moment, he had an ominous feeling in his heart. Lian Jiufeng had gone to the Jiuli Demon Realm to obtain the Three Lives Blood Jade. The Three Lives Blood Jade was used to help Lian Jiufeng and Cher awaken their memories. However, Lian Jiufeng had wanted to steal the Three Lives Blood Jade. In the end, he and Nietion had each obtained half of the Three Lives Blood Jade. Did Lian Jiufeng come for the other half of the Three Lives Blood Jade? Have you forgotten? Lian Jiufeng stared at Nietion strangely before letting out a laugh. If that's the case, allow me to remind you of something. When you first came to the Nine Realms, you were in a hurry to find the boundary of the first demonic fire universe. You obtained information about the boundary of the universe from the net above and Earth. You agreed to Elder Dugu Lingtian's 3 conditions. Now, do you remember? Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly before he smiled and said, "So that's what you're talking about." Lian Jiufeng had not come for the Three Lives Blood Jade. He had come for something else. Back then, Nietion had agreed to the net above and Earth's 3 conditions to obtain information about the boundary of the universe. Of the 3 conditions, he had completed 2, but he had not completed the 3rd. The 3rd condition of the net above and Earth was for Wind and Cloud Alliance to release 1 person. 7 kills. 7 kills had challenged Nie Fenghua and was imprisoned by Wind and Cloud Alliance after losing. The net above and Earth wanted to use Nietion to get Wind and Cloud Alliance to release 7 kills. The first time Nietion heard the name 7 kills, he felt a strong murderous intent. This person was definitely a violent and bloodthirsty person. However, a long time had passed, so he had forgotten about it. Nietion, a promise is a promise. Lian Jiufeng smiled faintly when he saw that Nietion had remembered. He said, "You won't go back on your word, will you? You don't have to provoke me. Since I've agreed to it, how could I go back on my word?" Nietion faintly smiled. The corner of his lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "I'm very curious. Just who is 7 kills? Why does the nets of heaven and earth value him so much? Since the inescapable net had asked Lian Jiufeng to handle Qisha's matter personally, it was enough to prove that Qisha held an extraordinary significance to the inescapable net. It's none of your business who 7 kills is. Lian Jiufeng smiled faintly and said, all you need to do is have Wind and Cloud Alliance release 7 kills. With your identity and position, I don't think the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master will reject your request. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. Although he still maintained a calm expression, he was quite shocked in his heart. At that moment, he suddenly thought of something, and he had a guess about 7 kills' true identity. However, he wasn't sure, so he didn't want to say it now. Didn't you want to kill Phantasm Remnant, Lian Jiufeng? After a moment of pondering, Nietion laid his eyes on the Phantasm soul and said with a faint smile, let's do it. He could sense that Lian Jiufeng was a late-stage paramount god. It seemed that after obtaining the 3 lives blood jade, Lian Jiufeng's memories were slowly awakening, and his strength was increasing by leaps and bounds. Nietion was very curious to know just how strong Lian Jiufeng was. Phantasm Remnant was a good opponent, and he could use it to test out Lian Jiufeng's strength. Oomph! Lian Jiufeng sneered and looked at Phantasm Remnant with disdain. He's too weak. He's not worth my time. How arrogant! Do you really think you can kill me? Phantasm Remnant sneered, and a black vortex appeared next to him. Nietion's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He wasn't unfamiliar with this scene at all. The black vortex was none other than the space-time vortex created by Devil's Knight's Eye. Last time, Phantasm Remnant had used this method to escape. Farewell, Phantasm Remnant said with a sinister smile, then took a step forward and entered the black vortex. But in the next moment, a strange scene occurred. Phantasm Remnant entered the vortex, but he didn't vanish. The black vortex seemed to be locked down by some terrifying power. Such strong sword intent. Nietion's eyebrows furrowed in astonishment. He could tell that someone was using sword intent to lock down the space-time vortex and prevent Phantasm Remnant from escaping. You think you can pull off something like that in front of me? Lian Jiufeng sneered, his lips curling into a cold, murderous smile. Swoosh! Just at the instant his laughter fell, a piercingly cold sword shadow flashed in the air. Phantasm Remnant didn't even have time to react before it was devoured by the sword shadow. The sudden scene caused Nietion to gasp. Only now did he realize that a terrifying expert was hiding beside Lian Jiufeng. QL11, it was very likely that this person was an expert close to peak God realm. Let's go, Nietion. Lian Jiufeng smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Leave. However, right at this moment an ice-cold voice sounded out. Did I agree? Lian Jiufeng's expression abruptly darkened. Then, he turned around and looked at the person who had spoken. He laughed and said, Nietion, your luck with women is pretty good. It seems like every woman by your side is extraordinary. Nietion frowned and looked at Jun Ouching. The person who had spoken just now was none other than Jun Ouching. Jun Ouching was extremely angry right now. She didn't want to see Nietion threatened by anyone. You're courting death. Jun Ouching shouted. She suddenly moved and vanished into thin air. Not good. Lian Jiufeng immediately sensed that something was wrong. His expression changed, and he cried out. He clearly hadn't expected Jun Ouching to be far stronger than he had expected. Boom! Without any hesitation, Lian Jiufeng's body shook, and the terrifying power of golden flames surged out of his body. It enveloped him like a shield of fire. Boom! In the next moment, a sword shadow suddenly appeared in the air. It was extremely strange. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Bang! Then there was a dull sound, and Lian Jiufeng was sent flying. He left a bloody trail in the air. Jun Ouching was a space-time martial practitioner. Her sword intent was so powerful that it could cut through space and time around her. Therefore, her attack was extremely strange, unpredictable, and unpredictable. Die! A clear and harsh voice rang out while Lian Jiufeng was still in the air. June Ouching's figure was like a ghost, flashing away. Chapter 2345. Not only did June Ouching not stop after heavily injuring Lian Jiufeng, she even wanted to kill him directly. June Ouching, don't kill him. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Nie Tian suddenly reacted and screamed. Is not equal than Nie Tian had fought Lian Jiufeng many times before, so he naturally knew that the latter was not a kind person. However, Lian Jiufeng's identity was special, so he could not die just yet. More importantly, if June Ouching killed Lian Jiufeng, it would completely enrage the inescapable net. At that time, the inescapable net would chase after June Ouching at all costs. The consequences of that would be very serious. Even if the Emperor of Hell had not revived yet, the inescapable net had peak God realm experts like Tian Chief and D Chief. In the air, June Ouching swung her sword down. The sword was sharp and gave off a terrifying aura of space-time. It seemed like it could tear through anything. In that moment, Lian Jiufeng felt the most realistic killing intent. His eyes trembled, and his shock was written all over his face. He never thought that June Ouching would be so terrifying. There was no doubt that Lian Jiufeng would die the moment the sword landed. Boom! But when the fatal sword was less than 10 meters away from Lian Jiufeng, it suddenly trembled and disappeared. June Ouching's figure froze in the air. She looked at Lian Jiufeng with cold disdain and said indifferently, "You're so weak. I really don't know where you get the courage to be so arrogant." His indifferent voice was filled with a strong sense of mockery. Lian Jiufeng was covered in blood, and his eyes were still in shock. He looked at June Ouching with undisguisable wariness. It could be said that this was the most dangerous moment he had encountered since his rebirth. Even when he had fought against Nie Tian many times, he had never been in such a sorry state. June Ouching had almost killed him with 2 easy strikes. If Nie Tian hadn't shouted in time, Lian Jiufeng would have been a corpse by now. Nie Tian heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that June Ouching had stopped in time. If Lian Jiufeng really died, there was no telling what the consequences would be. "She's so scary." Nie Qingwan looked up at June Ouching. Her eyes were trembling, and her face was stiff. At this moment, she finally understood that Nie Tian was not the only one who was more talented than her. There was also June Ouching. She even felt that Nie Tian might not be as good as June Ouching. At this moment, Nie Tian's expression was not only relaxed, but also shocked. June Ouching was too terrifying. She had killed Ni Lin's expert with a single strike. At this moment, Lian Jiufeng had nearly lost his life. Nie Tian didn't think he could reach such a level of battle prowess. More importantly, June Ouching's space-time sword intent was too terrifying. It could tear through space to attack an opponent. No one could dodge it. Thank goodness Lian Jiufeng is not dead, Nie Tian thought to himself as he looked at Lian Jiufeng. But in the next moment, he suddenly felt the killing intent in Lian Jiufeng's eyes. His expression changed. "Kill!" Lian Jiufeng's eyes turned cold at almost the same time. June Ouching's expression changed slightly when she heard Lian Jiufeng's voice. Whoosh! At this moment, a sharp sword shadow appeared in the air. It was filled with killing intent and pressed down on June Ouching. The sudden scene caused Nie Tian's eyes to shake. Then he shot into the sky. He never thought that Lian Jiufeng would not stop and wanted to kill June Ouching. The one who attacked was the expert hiding beside Lian Jiufeng. June Ouching's reaction was very fast. Her long sword swept out. A sword shadow whistled out like a stormy sea, stirring up the void and making it tremble. In midair, the 2 sword shadows collided with each other. The space suddenly shook, and a terrifying sword wave spread out in all directions. The hidden expert was very strong. He was clearly stronger than June Ouching. Boom! The surging sword intent spread and pressed down on June Ouching. June Ouching's expression changed abruptly. She could not suppress the fear in her eyes. In a situation like this, the space around her was filled with terrifying sword intent. She could not avoid the wave of sword energy. She was very strong, but her martial body was very weak. In fact, she was weaker than other martial practitioners of the same level. If she was hit by such a terrifying wave of sword energy, she would be heavily injured even if she did not die. Boom! In this moment of danger, June Ouching suddenly felt a vast power appear. It enveloped her and formed a white barrier around her. Bang! In the next moment, the wave of sword energy hit the white barrier. June Ouching was sent flying, but she was caught by a figure in the air. June Ouching, are you all right? Nie Tian steadied himself and asked nervously. He was the one who used the light, young heavenly armor to protect June Ouching. QL 11-inch, I'm fine. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of June Ouching's mouth. Her face was slightly pale, but her aura was steady. She was not heavily injured. She looked at Lian Jiofeng coldly. She did not think that Lian Jiofeng would want to kill her after she showed mercy. Lian Jiofeng, what are you doing? Nie Tian abruptly looked up and stared at Lian Jiofeng. He roared angrily. Shouldn't I kill someone who is a threat to me? Lian Jiofeng wiped away the blood on his body and stared coldly at June Ouching. I won't allow you to kill her, Nie Tianling said coldly. His eyes were extremely dark. If Lian Jiofeng still wanted to kill June Ouching, then he was forcing him to turn against him. Mfumph. Suddenly, Lian Jiofeng laughed and said, I can give you face and let her live for a few more days. The figure hiding in the air instantly disappeared when he finished speaking. Nie Tian's tense nerves finally relaxed. His rationality told him that this was not the time to completely break off his relationship with Lian Jiofeng. June Ouching's eyes were cold. She looked a little embarrassed. Nie Tian, see you at the Wind Cloud Alliance in 3 days, Lian Jiofeng said cold after recovering a little. He left immediately after saying this. Nie Tian looked in the direction Lian Jiofeng left in and couldn't help but look worried. It looked like he really was going to the Wind Cloud Alliance this time. Lian Jiofeng had come for 7 kills, and Nie Tian had already guessed 7 kills' true identity. 7 kills had challenged Nie Fenghua and was imprisoned by the Wind Cloud Alliance after losing. The fact that the inescapable net wanted to save 7 kills meant that he was very important to the inescapable net. The inescapable net's true goal was to revive the Netherworld Emperor. Lian Jiofeng had obtained the 3 Lives Blood Jade, but he still hadn't revived the Netherworld Emperor. Instead, he had come to save 7 kills. This meant that 7 kills was indispensable to the revival of the Netherworld Emperor. Back in the Julie Demon Realm, the Wood Spirit King Mu Xiangshan had told Nie Tian that the heaven-punishing demon heart's 3 incarnations must be gathered in order to revive the Netherworld Emperor. Now, the good share and the evil Lian Jiofeng had appeared. There was still the slaughter body that had yet to appear. It was definitely no coincidence that Lian Jiofeng had come to save 7 kills at this time. Chapter 2346. 7 kills is the killing form. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he confirmed his guess. The killing form was the strongest among the 3 transformations of the heaven-punishing demon heart. From its name, it could be determined that this killing form was an extremely bloodthirsty and terrifying character. Fortunately, 7 kills was defeated by Nie Fenghua and imprisoned in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Otherwise, no one knew what kind of bloodshed this person would have caused in the 9 realms. Looks like I have to go to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nie Tian smiled bitterly. A beautiful face appeared in his mind. Mo Rushi. Rushi, it's been a long time. How are you? Thinking of Mo Rushi, Nie Tian couldn't help but smile. He had been separated from Mo Rushi for years. He wondered how she was doing. He also wondered if he could see Mo Rushi in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Let's go. Nie Tian landed and glanced at June Ouching and Nie Qingwan. Where are we going? Nie Qingwan was stunned and asked. The Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Tian said. The Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nie Qingwan screamed. I'm not going. I've finally escaped. I don't want to go back. Little girl, it's not up to you whether you want to return to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nie Tian laughed and looked at Nie Qingwan with an unfriendly gaze. What do you want? Nie Qingwan thought Nie Tian wanted to do something. She was so scared that she was trembling. I'm sending you to a fun place. Nye Tian laughed. 9 extremes appeared in his hand, and a space-time light appeared. With a thought, the sword intent around him surged and pushed Nye Qingwan into the 9 extremes. Before Nye Qingwan could figure out what was going on, she was already in an unfamiliar place. Little girl, there's a Pai Xiao and a golden hoe accompanying you inside, so you won't be too lonely. Nye Tian smiled faintly and put Juji away. He then looked at Jun Aoqing and said, "Let's go." Jun Aoqing did not ask much, but silently followed behind Nye Tian. The Wind and Cloud Alliance was located in 9 Heavens City, which was also the God-forbidding region. However, it was tens of thousands of miles away from the Demon Sealing City, where Nye Tian was. According to Lian Jiufeng's promise, they would meet at the Wind and Cloud Alliance in 3 days. 3 days was enough for Nye Tian to hurry on with his journey. He didn't want to complicate matters, so he prepared to fly on his own. Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing traveled very fast. A distance of tens of thousands of miles was nothing to them. 2.5 days later, the two appeared at the outskirts of the 9 Heavens mountain range. 9 Heavens City is just past the 9 Heavens mountain range. Nye Tian looked at the 9 Heavens mountain range and smiled faintly. Your sister is still in Jiuji. Do you want to let her out? Jun Aoqing suddenly thought of Nye Qingwan and couldn't help but laugh. That girl is too noisy. Let her stay inside. Nye Tian smiled faintly. He had no intention of letting Nye Qingwan out. That's fine. Jun Aoqing smiled. She actually didn't want Nye Qingwan to come out either. She liked having Nye Tian by her side. The two didn't say anything else. Their figures flashed, and they directly entered the 9 Heavens mountain range. The two of them were like 2 sword shadows speeding through the forest. About an hour later, the two arrived at the other end of the 9 Heavens mountain range. They would soon pass through the entire mountain range. Through the dense forest, Nye Tian could even see the tall city walls of 9 Heavens City. Seeing that 9 Heavens City was already in sight, Nye Tian couldn't help but speed up. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly changed. Watch out! Jun Aoqing's voice rang out. Boom, boom, boom. Almost at the same time as her voice rang out, 3 sharp arrows appeared in the void, whistling through the air. Nye Tian's eyes focused on the 3 sharp arrows in the air. The sharp arrows' aura was extremely majestic, as though they were tearing through the void. A layer of purple lightning surged around the huge arrows, surging violently. QL11, judging from their aura, such terrifying sharp arrows could directly kill a late-stage Paramount God expert. Extreme Yang Sky Armor, activate. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched slightly. Light flashed around him, and the Extreme Yang Sky Armor was activated, enveloping him and Jun Aoqing. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, the 3 sharp arrows fell, but they couldn't penetrate the Extreme Yang Sky Armor and directly shattered. Given Nye Tian's current strength, even an ordinary peak Paramount God expert wouldn't be able to penetrate his Extreme Yang Sky Armor. Although the 3 sharp arrows were terrifying, they posed no threat to him. However, the fact that he was being used as a target for no reason infuriated Nye Tian. Who's there? Show yourself. He roared, sending his divine sense out to scan the area within 10,000 meters. There was nothing there. Clearly, the person who had shot the arrows had hidden himself. Frowning, Nye Tian couldn't help but be more cautious. He didn't know who his opponent was, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Roar! Right at this moment, an angry roar that sounded like that of a wild beast suddenly rang out in the distance. Then, a violent aura appeared and directly attacked Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he saw the forest in front of him being destroyed by a wild force. Everything in the area was reduced to ashes. What a powerful lightning-type aura, he thought. His eyes narrowed, and his heart filled with shock. He had already sensed that the person who had attacked him was a lightning-type martial artist. However, he hadn't expected the opponent's lightning-type power to be so strong. Judging from the aura alone, Nye Tian had never seen such a terrifying lightning-type aura before. Even his lightning sword intent didn't have this kind of thunderous aura. Boom! In the next moment, a bolt of purple lightning appeared and condensed into the figure of a giant wolf in the air, pouncing toward Nyetian. Wherever the purple lightning giant wolf passed, the surrounding area was swept by the lightning and turned to ashes. Even the boulders were turned to dust. Nyetian. June Ouching's expression changed when she sensed the purple lightning giant wolf's ferocious aura, and she called out nervously, "I'm here. You'll be fine." Immediately afterwards, he raised his arm and exerted a tremendous amount of force into his palm. The ground in front of him was actually lifted into the air by his palm strike. Destruction Earth seal open. His lips twitched slightly, and the ground in front of him rose up as if a mountain had been erected on the ground, protecting them like a shield. Rumble. In the next instant, the purple lightning giant wolf was like a boulder descending from the sky, landing on the ground. Instantly, the ground was shattered into pieces and a huge wave was formed. At that instant, Nyetian pushed his palm forward and pushed the wave away, following which he slashed down with his sword, and wherever the sword shadow landed, the purple thunder giant wolf crumbled. One could not help but admit that the purple lightning giant wolf was extremely terrifying. Luckily, Nyetian's reaction was quick enough. Otherwise, he would have suffered serious injuries when the purple lightning giant wolf got close to him. He could sense that the purple lightning giant wolf was extremely violent. Even his martial body was unable to withstand it. Among the 9 elemental powers, the lightning-type power was known as the strongest attack. Chapter 23:47. Nyetian steadied himself and lifted his head to look ahead. Although he had expanded his divine sense to the maximum, extending tens of thousands of meters away, he still could not sense the enemy's aura. The person who had attacked him had been hiding in the dark, preventing Nyetian from discovering him. "Nyetian, be careful." At this moment, Little Fat Cat's voice rang out. It was slightly nervous as it said, "If I'm not mistaken, that purple lightning should be the source of lightning. Purple Thunder 9 howls." Upon hearing Little Fat Cat's words, Nyetian's eyes widened in shock. He had not expected to encounter the legendary Thunder origin energy, Purple Thunder 9 roars, when he had just arrived at the 9 Heavens Mountain. No wonder he felt that the Thunder aura was so terrifying. It was the Thunder origin energy. His Thunderbolt sword essence was also the Thunder origin energy. However, compared to the Purple Thunder 9 roars, it was much weaker. Nyetian. June Ouching seemed to have noticed something and sent a voice transmission to Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes narrowed, but his expression did not change much. He knew that June Ouching's divine sense was above his. She must have discovered the enemy's hiding place. Roar. However, before June Ouching could speak again, a violent roar was heard from afar. It sounded like a dragon's roar. Boom! In the next instant, an even more terrifying bolt of purple lightning surged forward like a purple ocean, roaring and roaring. Nyetian's eyes darkened when he felt the aura of the purple thunder. The aura of this bolt of purple lightning was several times stronger than the one from before. This time, if Nyetian continued to defend passively, he would be at a great disadvantage. Sword sealing formation, world-devouring sword dragon. In an instant, Nyetian reacted. He let out a low roar, and a terrifying sword essence gushed out of his body. At the same time, his blood chi surged, and his aura soared to the extreme. This was an unavoidable attack. He had to face it head-on. Boom! But at this moment, the bolt of purple lightning struck. It shook violently in the air and condensed into a giant purple lightning dragon. Crack! 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 The purple thunder dragon's body was thousands of meters long, and the purple thunder power around it exploded like thunder. It seemed that even the sky and earth were going to be torn apart. The violent scene caused June Ouching's pretty face to freeze slightly. Even her space-time sword intent could not withstand such a terrifying aura. However, Nyetian was not afraid in the slightest. He released the God-Fiend power in his body, and the God-Fiend sword intent appeared once more. Starlight heavenly slashed out. Roar! The sword will fused with the terrifying power of the sword's sealing forbidden array and condensed into a sword dragon that was thousands of meters long. It roared loudly and shook the sky. Boom! Boom! In the void, there were two giant dragons. One was condensed from the power of purple lightning, while the other was condensed from the fiend god sword intent. Both of them possessed boundlessly violent energy. Boom! In the next instant, the two enormous dragons collided with one another, causing the space to tremble and the heavens and earth to fall silent. The two enormous dragons were too powerful. Neither of them could swallow the other in an instant. They could only wrestle with each other and hit each other bit by bit. Chi, chi, chi. There were ear-piercing sounds in the sky. Streaks of crazy energy were wreaking havoc in the sky. It was extremely terrifying. The purple lightning and the black sword intent surged out. The surrounding space was chaotic, as if it was the end of the heavens and earth. Nyetion's figure quickly retreated, and he stared at the sky, not daring to relax for even a moment. He had thought that the other party was just a nobody, but now it seemed that the other party's strength was no weaker than his. Boom! At this moment, the two enormous dragons finally could not hold on any longer. They exploded at the same time, and endless violent energy surged out, shaking the heavens and earth. The violent energy in the void dissipated after a long time, and the space became calm again, as if nothing had happened. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of Nyetion's mouth. He looked forward, but still could not feel anything. Nyetion, in front. At this moment, Jun Aoqing's voice suddenly sounded, reminding Nyetion. Nyetion snapped out of his daze and slashed out with his sword without so much as a glance at it. The 1,000-meter-long sword shadow was like a raging dragon, roaring and rolling. Bang! In the void, there was a muffled sound, and then a figure in black appeared in the void. A pair of evil eyes stared at Nyetion. Nyetion looked at the martial artist in black, and his eyes slightly narrowed. He did not know this person, but the latter looked at him with a playful expression. "Who are you?" Nyetion frowned and asked coldly. "You don't deserve to know my name." The martial artist in black sneered, and his attitude was extremely arrogant. "Oomph, are you stronger than me?" Nyetion laughed and said indifferently, "In my opinion, you're just a shameless person who ambushes others. Kid, your strength has indeed exceeded my expectations, but you won't be so lucky the next time we meet." The martial artist in black smiled coldly, and then his figure moved, and he left. Nyetion did not stop him, but his frown deepened. From the martial artist's words, it seemed that he had been waiting for Nyetion. Not many people knew that Nyetion had come to Wind and Cloud Alliance. In order not to alert others, he had come on his own. How did this martial artist know that Nyetion was coming? Lian Jiufeng. Then, a name appeared in Nyetion's mind, and his expression darkened. Lian Jiufeng was the only one who knew that he was coming to Wind and Cloud Alliance. Then the person in front of him must have been ordered by Lian Jiufeng. This person had thunder origin energy, so he was definitely from one of the 9 great families. However, Nyetion was not sure which family he was from. Lian Jiufeng really had some skill. He could even mobilize people from the 9 great families. However, Nyetion felt that the martial artist might not have come for him, but for Jun Aoqing. Just now, he clearly felt that the person this black-clothed martial artist wanted to kill was not him, but Jun Aoqing. It seemed that Lian Jiufeng still held a grudge that he had almost died at the hands of Jun Aoqing and wanted to kill Jun Aoqing. Lian Jiufeng must have felt threatened by Jun Aoqing. That was why he was in such a hurry to get rid of her. QL11, unfortunately, the martial artist he had sent wasn't very strong. He had no intention of killing Jun Aoqing. Right now, what interested Nyetion the most was not the relationship between the martial artist and Lian Jiufeng, but the purple thunder 9 roars within the martial artist's body. One had to admit that the power of the purple thunder 9 roars was terrifying. If Nyetion was any weaker, he would have died at the hands of the martial artist in black a long time ago. The Blackguard man was only a late paramount god, and the only reason he had the battle prowess of a peak paramount god was because of the violet lightning 9 howls. Nyetian, this guy didn't even use the true power of the 9 roars of purple thunder. Otherwise, you would have been a corpse long ago. Little Fat Cat's voice rang out as it chuckled. Nyetian was stunned. His expression froze. Chapter 2348. Nyetian stood rooted to the spot and only reacted after a long while. He had returned to the 9 realms this time to find out about the 9 origins. In just a few days, he had met people with light origin and lightning origin. It seemed like he was quite lucky. Faintly, he had a feeling that he would encounter even more cultivators with origin energy. Nyetian, are you hurt? June Ouching asked nervously when she saw the blood at the corner of Nyetian's mouth. QL 11-inch, I'm fine. Nyetian smiled faintly and wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth. He was only slightly injured and would be fine soon. Then, the two wasted no time and left the 9 Heavens mountain range, heading towards 9 Heavens City. After a while, Nyetian and June Ouching appeared on the streets of 9 Heavens City. After Nyetian asked about the Wind and Cloud Alliance's location, he headed there directly. 9 Heavens City was crowded. Nyetian and June Ouching took a whole hour to cross half of the city. At this moment, an extremely wide plaza appeared before them. At the entrance were 3 towering stone pillars with 3 words carved on them: Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nyetian looked around and found it strange that there was not a single person in the huge plaza. He walked towards the plaza without hesitation. The two quickly arrived at the end of the plaza, and a narrow passageway appeared before them. Who's there? Before they stepped into the passageway, they heard a deep, angry roar. Then, 2 cultivators in green descended from the sky and appeared before Nyetian and June Ouching. Nyetian's eyes flickered when he glanced at the two. The 2 cultivators were not powerful. They were only peak over gods. However, they were clearly just ordinary guards. Ordinary guards were already peak over gods. It was enough to show how powerful the Wind and Cloud Alliance was. Brothers, my name is Nyetian. I'm a disciple of the Nye family. I have something to discuss with the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master, Nyetian said politely after thinking for a moment. The 2 guards glanced at Nyetian and June Ouching with a strange gaze, and then burst into laughter. 2 kids who were still wet behind the ears, asking to see the Alliance Master the moment they opened their mouths. Who do you think you are? Hurry up and scram. This is the territory of the Wind and Cloud Alliance. It's not a place where you can mess around. If you anger me, I'll kill you with a single palm strike. The 2 guards were very arrogant. They only saw that Nyetian and June Ouching were very young, but they did not know their strength. Sure enough, being polite is the best way to improve the Wind and Rain Alliance. Nyetian smiled bitterly. The 2 guards were stunned at the same time. They looked at Nyetian and said, Kid, I think you're tired of living. Nyetian laughed and did not say anything else. Instead, he shook his body and 2 sword intents surged out. They turned into a sword intent cage and enveloped the 2 guards. The sudden scene caused the 2 guards to turn pale in fright. They screamed at the same time. I'll have to trouble you too. After I leave, the sword intent cage will break by itself. Nyetian smiled faintly and stepped into the tunnel before him. June Ouching smiled and followed. The 2 guards turned pale and did not dare to move. They could feel how terrifying the sword intent was. If they resisted, they would lose their lives. They did not expect the strength of these 2 kids to be so terrifying. As Nyetian walked through the tunnel, a majestic palace appeared in front of him. It looked like a giant that had weathered through the elements, but still stood tall. But at that moment, dozens of martial artists appeared in the sky. They stared coldly at Nyetian. Nyetian looked up into the sky and swept his gaze across everyone present as he muttered, "That's more like it." The guards were all paramount gods, and there were even a few mid-paramount gods among them. As one of the top forces in the 9 major realms, it was not strange for the Wind and Rain Alliance to have paramount god guards. But in Nyetian's eyes, they were too weak. Who are you? One of the guards asked coldly. He stared at Nyetian and June Ouching with killing intent. Don't be nervous. We're not enemies. Nyetian smiled faintly and tried to be polite. However, the guards didn't fall for that. Instead, they unleashed their energy and sent it rumbling toward Nyetian. Nyetian shook his head and smiled, speechless. Given his current level of strength, he wasn't even afraid of peak experts from the 9 major realms. Why would he be afraid of a bunch of early-stage or mid-stage paramount gods? Rumble. His body shook slightly, and he directly shook off the pressure in the air. The dozens of guards were actually forced to retreat. How impudent! Right at this moment, a vigorous roar rang out, following which a figure dashed out and slammed his palm down towards Nyetian. The boundless force of the palm pressed down on Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes narrowed, and he summoned his astral power to form an astral shield to protect himself and Junouching. Boom! Immediately after, the terrifying shadow of the palm landed. The ground shook violently, and a huge crack appeared on it. However, Nyetian's astral shield wasn't damaged in the slightest. In fact, it didn't even have a crack on it. Stay your hand. Nyetian growled, glaring at the attacker. These people were simply too violent. They didn't even give him a chance to explain himself. You must die for trespassing in the Wind Cloud Alliance. However, the attacker completely ignored Nyetian's words. His energy surged as he unleashed an even more terrifying palm strike. Nyetian frowned and couldn't help but want to make a move. However, before he could, Junouching said in a cold voice, "You're courting death." Blurring into motion, she blurred into motion. Junouching, don't hurt him. Nyetian was shocked and quickly shouted. He knew exactly how strong Junouching was. Even Blaze Jufeng had almost died at her hands. In front of Junouching, these guards couldn't fight back at all. Junouching appeared in front of them in an instant. She stabbed out with her sword, and her sword was swept through the air like an invisible hand. In the next moment, something strange happened. The space around them seemed to have frozen. The figures of the guards were like wooden statues, frozen in mid-air, unable to move at all. Nyetian's mouth fell open, but he couldn't say anything. It was too strange. It was as if dozens of paramount gods had been nailed in the air. This little girl's sword has gotten stronger again. Just then, little fat cat's voice rang out, filled with shock. How could he not see what Junouching was doing? She was using her sword to freeze space. As for the dozens of guards, they were all trapped in the frozen space. Fat Cat didn't expect Junouching's space-time sword to be this terrifying. She could freeze space with a casual swing of her sword. Who dares to behave so atrociously in the Wind and Cloud Alliance? At this moment, a thunderous roar resounded in the void. A gray-robed elder appeared in the sky, his eyes locked onto Junouching. What a powerful aura! Nyetian reacted. He looked at the gray-robed elder and sensed the latter's aura. He was shocked. Chapter 23:49. Nyetian stared at the gray-robed elder and narrowed his eyes. Is not equal to judging from his aura. The elder's battle strength should be close to the peak of the godly state. Nyetian guessed that the elder's position in the Wind and Cloud Alliance was not low. Junouching steadied herself and looked at the gray-robed elder cold. She did not speak, nor did she attack. She was waiting for Nyetian's reply. Senior, I am Nyetian from the Nye clan. I have come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to seek an audience with the Alliance leader. Nyetian looked at the gray-robed elder indifferently and said respectfully, I did not mean to offend the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Please forgive me if I have offended you. The person before him should be a high-ranking member of the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Judging from his age, he should be of the same generation as Nyetian's grandfather, Nyedao. It was not wrong for Nyetian to call him senior. I don't care who you are. However, the gray-robed elder's expression was cold. He said coldly, There's only one outcome for provoking the Wind and Cloud Alliance, death. Nyetian went blank for a moment and couldn't help but frown. He did not expect the other party to react in such a manner after apologizing politely. Admittedly, it was wrong of him to barge into the Wind and Cloud Alliance. However, he did not attack the people from the Wind and Cloud Alliance. He only defended himself. Even Junouching only controlled the guards and did not hurt them at all. The gray-robed elder saw all this. How could he not know Nye Tian's intention? If Nye Tian was really here to provoke the Wind and Cloud Alliance, the guards before him would have been long dead. The gray-robed elder's way of doing things was too domineering. Storm guards. At this moment, the gray-robed elder suddenly roared. The surrounding space shook and 9 black-robed martial artists appeared. They stood in midair and stared coldly at Nye Tian and Jun Ouching. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he scanned the 9 storm royal guards with his divine sense. His expression changed slightly. All 9 of them were late paramount gods, and their auras were very similar. Clearly, they were all of the same type. Judging from the positions of these 9 people, they were clearly cooperating with each other, and there was a faint aura of a formation around them. Kill! The gray-clothed old man looked at Nye Tian with a gaze that suddenly emanated an icy, cold, killing intent. He roared furiously and actually gave the order to kill. The 9 storm Imperial Guardians moved in unison, moving back and forth in the air. Suddenly, the entire space was filled with a vast and boundless power of the formation. Nye Tian, you have to be careful. These 9 people are all wind attribute martial artists. Each of them will be the core of a formation and will form a formation. Fat Cat's voice rang out to warn Nye Tian. When 9 of them work together, they're even more terrifying than an ordinary peak paramount god. Nye Tian nodded slightly, then looked over at Jun Ouching, who immediately flew over to his side. Wind surge killed him. In the next moment, the 9 storm royal guards shouted in unison, unleashing their most powerful energy. 9 gales of wind, combined with the power of the spell formation, were like 9 wild dragons that shot toward Nye Tian and Jun Ouching. Nye Tian frowned slightly as he sensed the energy coming from above. The combined power of these 9 storm royal guards was truly terrifying. They were powerful enough to kill an ordinary peak paramount god in the blink of an eye. However, to Nye Tian, the 9 of them didn't pose much of a threat at all. That said, the dozens of guards in the area were in grave danger. Even if they were only hit by the wind, they would either be seriously injured or killed. The storm royal guards were like madmen. In order to kill Nye Tian, they didn't even care about their own people. Howling, Nye Tian shot up into the air and slashed out with his sword. This was none other than his most powerful move, the sagely heaven-defying swordplay, man-sword severing stars. Rumble. The sword intent was piercingly cold, and the image of the sword was like a dragon as it shot up into the air, causing the surrounding space to tremble. At the same time, Nye Tian hovered in midair, radiating the power of the stars, which transformed into an astral soul shield that spread out to protect the dozens of guards. Rumble. In the next moment, the terrifying forces collided with each other. That sword shadow was extremely terrifying. The power of the sword intent bloomed, and the destructive power surged out, directly breaking through the 9 gales. The 9 storm royal guards were struck by the sword intent, and were sent flying backward. Bang! On the other side, the frozen space shattered under the impact of the sword intent. The dozens of guards were protected by the astral soul shield, and thus weren't injured. They immediately retreated to safety. What? The gray-robed old man's eyes widened. Clearly, he hadn't expected Nye Tian to be so strong, which was far beyond his expectations. But Nye Tian was clearly only a mid-paramount god. How could he possibly defeat the combined attack of 9 storm royal guards with a single sword strike? The gray-robed old man's gaze on Nye Tian grew even colder, filled with killing intent. Nye Tian's expression darkened when he sensed the killing intent. He didn't understand why the gray-robed old man would want to kill him so badly. After all, he hadn't done anything since coming to the Wind Cloud Alliance. He might have trespassed, but he hadn't provoked them. Didn't his actions just now prove everything? He had even protected the dozens of guards himself. Wasn't that enough to prove his goodwill? More importantly, he hadn't used his full strength in that attack. If he had, the 9 storm royal guards would have been gravely injured, if not dead. The 9 storm royal guards hovered in the air. Although they weren't injured, they were deeply shaken. They looked at Nye Tian with fear and trepidation. How could they have ever imagined that this young cultivator would have such shocking battle prowess? Brat, how dare you attack in the Wind Cloud Alliance? You're courting death. At this moment, the gray-robed old man let out a low roar. His figure flashed into the air, and his eyes locked onto Nietion with killing intent. Nietion looked at the gray-robed old man, his expression grim. The fact that the gray-robed old man had ordered the Storm Royal Guards to attack him was already very strange. But now he wanted to do it himself. That was even stranger. Moreover, his killing intent towards Nietion was very strong. His eyes were filled with the desire to kill him. Nietion thought that his actions had already made his intentions clear, but the gray-robed old man insisted on killing him. This made him very suspicious. He was curious as to where the gray-robed old man's killing intent was coming from. At this moment, even the guards were looking at the gray-robed old man in confusion. Clearly, they couldn't understand his actions. Nietion didn't kill him, and he even saved him. Clearly, he wasn't the one who provoked them. However, the guards didn't say anything because the gray-robed old man had a high status. He was one of the two deputy alliance leaders of the Wind Cloud Alliance, Ren Quanshan. QL11. Everyone in the Wind Cloud Alliance knew that Ren Quanshan was narrow-minded, cruel, and bloodthirsty. Anyone who doubted him in front of him would be courting death. Ren Quanshan seemed to have made up his mind to kill Nietion. Chapter 2350. Do you really want to kill me? Tianling stared coldly at Ren Quanshan from the sky and spoke in a deep voice. At this moment, he was already suspicious of his opponent's motives. However, since his opponent was from the Wind and Cloud Alliance, he had to be cautious. Brat, you will die for provoking the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Ren Quanshan replied coldly. His body shook and his aura surged. Boundless energy surged and filled the space within a few thousand meters. Nietion's eyes narrowed. He could immediately tell that Ren Quanshan was a wood attribute martial artist. Among the 9 elements of heaven and earth, the wood attribute was one of the weaker ones. As a wood attribute martial artist, it was not easy for Ren Quanshan to possess such strength. Brat. In the next instant, Ren Quanshan roared in a low voice and struck out with his palm. Immediately afterwards, the wild power in the air converged and morphed into a giant, withered tree hand that was thousands of meters long. Blotting out the sky and covering the earth, it descended towards Nietion. Nietion frowned, and his expression changed slightly. However, his lips curled into a faint smile. Ren Quanshan's strength was indeed above Nietion's. However, his wood attribute was his greatest weakness. Starfire Ocean Incinerator. Nietion's lips curled into a smile, and he struck out with his Starfire Heavenly Slash. A sword shadow appeared, and it looked like a fire dragon. The sword shadow was burning with blazing flames. So powerful, the guards and Imperial guards exclaimed when they saw the scene before them. Nietion's sword intent was extremely sharp. Most importantly, it contained the power of the fire attribute. This was extremely terrifying. Among the 5 elements, the fire attribute was the bane of the wood attribute. Moreover, Nietion's sword intent was not of the fire attribute. The crowd was curious. What attribute was Nietion a martial artist? Little did they know that Nietion had a star raw stone in his body. The power of the star raw stone could be transformed into any type of power. The power of fire was currently Nietion's strongest attribute. This was because his body had merged with the dual supreme fires. Boom! Under countless horrified gazes, the giant withered tree hand and the flaming sword shadow collided. With a loud boom in the air, the flaming sword shadow actually pierced through the giant withered tree hand. Ren Quanshan's gaze suddenly tightened. This was something that he had never expected. His reaction was very fast. He raised his hand abruptly, and a surging wild force appeared, blocking the sword shadow that was coming straight at him. However, his body was forced to take a few steps back. He was in a rather sorry state. At the same time, Nietion was hit by the violent force in the air and was forced to take a few steps back before stabilizing his body. After all, Ren Quanshan was a powerhouse who was close to the apex. Even though his attributes were suppressed, he was still able to fight evenly with Nietion. You want to kill me, but it's a pity that you don't have the strength to do so. Nietion looked at Rinquanchan, raised his eyebrows, and said provocatively. Nietion was very satisfied that he was able to fight against such an expert. After all, the difference in strength between him and Rinquanchan was too great. If it wasn't for the fact that their attributes were suppressed, he would have been severely injured in the exchange just now. The guards of the Wind and Cloud Alliance gasped in shock at the scene in front of them. Their mouths were wide open, but no words came out. They had never thought that Nietion would not be at a disadvantage when fighting against Rinquanchan head-on. Rinquanchan was the deputy alliance leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Not just in the Wind and Cloud Alliance, but even in the 9 major realms, he was a powerful expert. As for Nietion, he was obviously a young martial artist. Based on the age of a godly state martial artist, Nietion was still at the stage where he was still wet behind the ears. To be able to fight against Rinquanchan head-on at such a young age was too terrifying. It was hard to imagine how terrifying Nietion would be when he grew up. Rinquanchan looked at Nietion with a gloomy look in his eyes. His wrinkled face was as red as it could be. With his status and strength, it was indeed embarrassing that he couldn't even kill a junior when he attacked with all his might. Nietion, you forced me to do this. Rinquanchan's eyes suddenly turned cold, and he roared in his heart. He had directly called out Nietion's name. It was obvious that he already knew about Nietion. Nietion clearly saw the change in Rinquanchan's expression. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and he thought to himself, "You old man, there's something fishy about you." Just now, he could tell that Rinquanchan's actions were strange and ruthless. It was obvious that he wanted to kill him. And now, the change in Rinquanchan's gaze made him even more certain of this. He didn't know who Rinquanchan was, but he was sure that this person's identity was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. There must be another identity behind this person. Fusang Fishin. At this moment, Rinquanchan's lips curled into a cold smile, and he roared in a low voice. Boom! Immediately after, his body continuously released violent wood elemental power. Following this, a strange scene took place. Streams of violent energy surged out from Rinquanchan's body like tentacles and tore his body apart. His body instantly expanded like a giant tree soaring into the sky, spreading across the sky. Seeing this, Nietion could not help but frown. The transformation of Rinquanchan's body was similar to his previous dragonization. The only difference was that Nietion's dragonization was dragon transformation, while Rinquanchan had turned into a giant Fusang ancient tree. The others were astounded upon seeing this. Who would have thought that, in order to kill Nietion, Rinquanchan would actually use his trump card? In the blink of an eye, Rinquanchan's body had turned into a 3,000-meter-tall Fusang ancient tree. The giant tree stood tall in the sky, and its giant branches were like tentacles, waving in the air and emitting a violent aura, as if the heavens and earth were trembling. Feeling the aura of the Fusang ancient tree, Nietion couldn't help but change his expression. It seemed that after Rinquanchan transformed into the giant tree, there was an additional aura. It was an aura of the light attribute. Boom! While Nietion was puzzled, the Fusang ancient tree suddenly shook and then emitted a dazzling golden light. It was like a scorching sun, illuminating the space within hundreds of thousands of meters. Even the ground was covered with a layer of golden halo. Nietion frowned, and he was quite surprised. QL11 at this moment, he was very sure that Rinquanchan did contain the aura of 2 attributes at the same time. One was the wood attribute, and the other was the light attribute. It seemed that Rinquanchan was much stronger than he had imagined. Moreover, the aura released by the Fusang ancient tree was several times stronger than Rinquanchan's aura before. In this case, even if Nietion used the chaotic flame, he might not be able to resist the attack of the Fusang ancient tree. Boy, be obedient and die. At this moment, the Fusang ancient tree shook, and the golden light became even more dazzling. On the giant trunk, a blurry human face appeared, and it spoke in a deep voice. It was Rinquanchan's voice. Whoosh! The next moment, the Fusang ancient tree suddenly moved and endless power surged out. The light in the space was dazzling. Chapter 23:51. In the sky, Nietian squinted his eyes and tensed up. Kill! The Fuso giant tree let out another furious roar. Then the entire tree suddenly moved like a wild beast. In midair, the countless branches of the Fuso tree gathered together and formed a terrifying arm. With a loud rumble, it smashed down towards Niet Tian with great force. Bang! In an instant, the heavens and earth trembled. A blinding light poured down like a waterfall, accompanied by a violent force. Niet Tian, be careful! Jun Ouching, who was watching from below, couldn't help but cry out, her face pale with fright. She was not sure if Niet Tian could block Ren Quanshan's attack. Niet Tian stood in the sky with the 9 dragon veins in his body circulating rapidly. Dragon Qi surged behind him, and a crimson ocean of lightning appeared. He could not retreat. He could only fight with his life on the line. However, at this moment, he suddenly sensed something. His expression changed, and his eyes were filled with joy. Ren Quanshan stopped. In the next moment, a furious roar could be heard in the sky. Following this, a golden ray appeared and turned into a golden shield covering Niet Tian. Bang! Ren Quanshan's punch landed on the golden shield around Niet Tian, shattering it into pieces. The Fuso tree was knocked back a few hundred meters by the powerful impact. The tree trembled violently, as if it could not stand straight. In the next moment, a mountain-like figure descended and stood between Niet Tian and Ren Quanshan. Alliance leader, the sudden scene caused everyone to abruptly raise their heads. Their faces were filled with shock as they looked at the mountain-like figure, and they cried out in unison, "Grandfather!" Niet Tian's lips curled up as he looked at the familiar face before him. The person who appeared was none other than Niet Tian's grandfather, the alliance leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, Nie Dao. Ren Quanshan's figure shuddered in the air before he stabilized himself and returned to his human form. He looked at Nie Dao, bowed slightly, and called out, "Alliance Master." "Ren Quanshan, what are you doing?" Nie Dao's face was dark and cold. Clearly, he was furious. "Alliance Master, this person trespassed into the Wind and Cloud Alliance and injured the Wind and Cloud Imperial Guard. I had no choice but to act against him." Ren Quanshan's eyes flickered as he spoke in a deep voice. "What good excuse?" Nie Tianling laughed, but did not say anything else. "He's from the Nie clan." Nie Dao forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and said coldly, "This subordinate does not know." Ren Quanshan replied respectfully. Nie Dao glanced at Ren Quanshan and did not say anything else. Nie Tian looked at Ren Quanshan and smiled. He thought to himself, "Ren Quanshan, I'm afraid you know what kind of person I am. Otherwise, you wouldn't have spared no effort to kill me. It's just a misunderstanding. Everyone can leave." Nie Dao did not want to pursue the matter any further. All the guards retreated in an instant. "Lord Alliance Master, this subordinate will take his leave as well," Ren Quanshan said and left. "Nie Tian, let's go to the Wind and Cloud Palace first." Nie Dao looked at Nie Tian and scanned him with his divine sense. He could not hide the joy in his eyes. After a few years, Nie Tian's improvement was truly shocking. Nie Tian nodded slightly and followed Nie Dao to the Wind and Cloud Palace with Jun Ouching. After a while, the three arrived outside the Wind and Cloud Palace. "Nie Tian, wait here for a moment. I still have something to take care of." Before entering the Wind and Cloud Palace, Nie Dao suddenly stopped and signaled Nie Tian to wait outside the palace. "Okay." Nie Tian nodded and stopped outside the palace. At this moment, 2 figures walked out from the Wind and Cloud Palace. Seeing the 2 figures, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. One of the 2 figures was a middle-aged man, while the other was a young man. The middle-aged man's aura was extremely vigorous. It was not much weaker than Nie Dao's. However, Nie Tian's gaze was fixed on the young man's figure. "It's him." Nie Tian's expression sank as he sensed the young man's aura. The young man's face was unfamiliar, but his aura was extremely familiar. His entire body was emitting an extremely violent purple lightning aura. Nietian was certain that this man was the one who had ambushed him at the Nine Heavens mountain range not long ago. This guy's body had merged with the origin force of lightning, the purple thunder nine roars. It's him indeed. At the same time, Fat Cat exclaimed in surprise. June Ouching's expression changed too. Her eyes were filled with great hostility. Tian, Fat Cat, and June Ouching were extremely perceptive. They were certain that the young man before them was the one who had ambushed them. Tian did not expect to meet this guy in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. I didn't expect us to meet again so soon. It seems like fate has brought us together. At that moment, the young man spoke with a calm smile. Tian, you two know each other? Niet Dao asked after being stunned for a moment. Yes. Tian smiled and looked at the young man. I've met him once at the Nine Heavens mountain range not long ago. Oh. Niet Dao noticed something amiss with Tian's gaze. He chuckled and said, So you and Nangong Lin already know each other? Not really. Tian nodded and said, I just found out that his name is Nangong Lin. I also just found out that your name is Tian. Nangong Lin's lips twitched as he responded. Tian chuckled, but didn't say anything. He knew that Nangong Lin had ambushed him at the Nine Heavens mountain range. Therefore, Nangong Lin already knew his identity. Grandpa, this is... Tian didn't expose Nangong Lin. Instead, he smiled faintly and looked at the middle-aged man. He had already guessed that the middle-aged man was from the Nangong family, and his status was not low. This is the Nangong family's master, Lord Nangong Duo. Niet Dao glanced at Nangong Wua and introduced him. Oh, it's the Nangong family's master. My apologies. Tian smiled and said politely. He did not expect the middle-aged man to have such a high status. He was the Nangong family's master. The Nangong family had two super experts. One was the Nangong family's master, Nangong Duo, and the other was the Holy Parliament's vice president, Nangong Dushio. Tian had seen Nangong Dushio several times and even fought with her. It was his first time seeing Nangong Duo. Judging from his aura, Nangong Duo's strength should be similar to Nangong Dushio's. As for Nangong Lin's identity, Tian guessed that he should be Nangong Duo's son. Q11, he was right. Nangong Lin was indeed Nangong Duo's son. Chapter 23:52. Nangong Duo glanced at Tian. He didn't say anything, but a strange light flickered in his eyes, as if he understood something. 8. However, he didn't pay too much attention to Tian. Instead, he looked at Nie Dao and said, Patriarch Nie, we can't delay the marriage any longer. We have to abide by the agreement made by our ancestors. Patriarch Nangong, you don't need to remind me. I know what to do, Nie Dao replied coldly. As long as you know, Nangong Duo said with a cold smile, then left. Nangong Ling looked at Tian and smiled. We'll meet again, Tian. Tian smiled faintly, but didn't say anything. The Nangong father and son left the Wind Cloud Grand Hall and disappeared into the sky. Niet Dao frowned as he looked in the direction where the two of them had disappeared. His expression was ugly. Are you all right, Grandpa? Tian asked, frowning when he sensed Niet Dao's disappointment. I'm fine. Let's talk in the Grand Hall. Niet Dao forced a smile and walked into the Wind Cloud Grand Hall. The three of them entered the hall and took their seats. Tian, who is this young lady? Niet Dao's gaze swept over June Ouching, and he could not help but laugh as he asked. She's my friend, June Ouching. Tian smiled faintly, but didn't introduce her in detail. Niet Dao smiled faintly, then sent his divine sense into June Ouching. Instantly, his aged face stiffened. After a full 10 seconds, Niet Dao finally reacted. His expression softened a bit, and his voice trembled as he said, She's actually a late paramount god. Yeah, Tian said, nodding calmly. It was normal for Nie Dao to be so shocked by June Ouching's strength. After all, according to the martial Dao of the Nine Realms, June Ouching shouldn't even exist. Even Tian was a freakishly talented genius. Nie Dao was already shocked by Nie Tian's increase in strength. Now that he knew Jun Aoqing's strength, he was even more shocked. He didn't expect that there was someone more monstrous than Nie Tian in this world. After a while, Nie Dao calmed down and let out a long sigh. Nie Tian, you've suffered a lot these past few years. He knew that the reason why Nie Tian was able to increase his strength so quickly was not only because of his extraordinary talent, but also because of his extraordinary willpower. He dared to do what others did not dare to do. Most of the martial artists in this world relied on cultivation to increase their strength. However, there was an extremely small number of people who relied on continuous training to improve their strength. Nie Tian was one of these people, and he was the one who had the most successful in his training. To be able to get to where he was today, the life and death struggles that Nie Tian had experienced were not something that ordinary people could imagine. I'm fine. Nie Tian smiled faintly. Then, he thought of something and asked, Grandfather, why did the Nangong father and son come to find you? I heard Patriarch Nangong mention a marriage alliance. What does that mean? Sigh. Nie Dao sighed after hearing Nie Tian's question. His expression became solemn as he said, Nie Tian, there are some things that I can't tell you yet. I can only tell you that Nangong Dudu and I came here for Nangong Lin's marriage. Nie Tian's gaze sharpened as he frowned. Is the Nangong family planning a marriage alliance with the Nie family? He knew that the Nangong family should be biased towards the Holy Parliament. After all, Nangong Duxiu was the vice president of the Holy Parliament. Meanwhile, the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the Holy Parliament were on opposing sides. Therefore, the marriage alliance between the Nangong family and the Nie family was very strange. Yes, Nie Dao nodded and said, Nangong Lin is engaged to a girl from the Nie family. The Nangong father and son came today for this matter. Grandfather, is this a difficult matter? Nie Tian asked after seeing Nie Dao's frown. Nie Dao sighed again and said, the girl who is engaged to Nangong Lin ran away from the marriage. She disappeared half a month ago. I sent many people to look for her, but they couldn't find her. Ran away from the marriage? Nie Tian's gaze sharpened as he suddenly thought of something. His eyes trembled as he asked, Grandfather, is the girl who ran away from the marriage called Nie Qingwan? How did you know? Nie Dao's eyes trembled as he shouted in surprise. He looked at Nie Tian in disbelief. The girl who ran away from the marriage was called Nie Qingwan. But the strange thing was, how did Nie Tian know about Nie Qingwan? Nie Tian looked at Nie Dao and couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. He said, Grandfather, a few days ago, I met Nie Qingwan in the Demon's Ceiling City. Nie Dao was stunned. He stood up excitedly and said, Then where is she now? Stay by my side, Nie Tian said, and took out the 9 extremities. With a thought, he released Nie Qingwan. Nie Tian, you bastard! Nie Qingwan cursed as soon as she came out. But when she steadied herself, she suddenly saw a familiar old face and froze. Little Wan. Nie Dao looked at Nie Qingwan and his old face sank. Tears seemed to flow out of his eyes. Gee, Grandpa. Nie Qingwan looked at Nie Dao in a daze. It took a long time for her to react. Her little face instantly turned pale and looked very embarrassed. Nie Tian looked at Nie Qingwan and confirmed the latter's identity. It seemed that Nie Qingwan was indeed Nie Tian's clan sister. Moreover, she was his cousin. In the next moment, Nie Qingwan immediately reacted. She turned around and ran. Nie Qingwan, stop right there. Nie Dao suddenly roared. His voice was like a clap of thunder, echoing throughout the hall. Nie Qingwan's figure froze. Her legs felt as if they were filled with lead sand. She could no longer move. Grandfather! She immediately turned around. Her eyes were already filled with tears. She bit her lips and said, I will not marry Nangong Lin. Every word was spoken in a very resolute manner. QL11 Nie Dao's old face darkened. He froze on the spot, unable to speak. Seeing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown. He looked at Nie Dao and said, Grandfather, since Qingwan doesn't want to marry, why do you have to force her? Even if Nangong Lin and Qingwan are engaged, we can just break the engagement. With the Wind and Cloud Alliance's strength, do you think the Nangong family would dare to attack us? The Wind and Cloud Alliance's strength far surpassed the Nangong family. Even if they broke the engagement, there should be no problem. However, Niet Dao looked very solemn. This made Niet Tian very confused. Niet Tian, things aren't as simple as you think. Niet Dao let out a long sigh. He seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. Niet Tian's face was full of confusion. He asked, "Grandfather, what are you worried about?" Niet Dao froze on the spot. After thinking for a long time, he finally said, "The engagement between Nangong Lin and Qing Wan was decided by the Nie family's ancestors. Even if I am the Nie family's patriarch, I can't change it." Huh? Niet Tian's gaze froze. He couldn't help but be stunned. The Nie family's ancestors should be people from hundreds of thousands of years ago, or even earlier, and Nie Qing Wan was only in her 20s. How could a Nie family's ancestors decide Nie Qing Wan's marriage? Nie Dao's words made Niet Tian even more confused. "Grandfather, what is going on?" Niet Tian couldn't help but ask out of curiosity. Chapter 2353. In the Great Hall, Niet Tian looked at Niet Dao with shining eyes, waiting for the latter to tell him everything. "Niet Tian, you once asked me why the Zhou family head was after you." Niet Dao's expression was solemn as he stared at Niet Tian. "I didn't tell you the truth at the time. Now, I've decided to tell you the truth." Niet Tian nodded and listened attentively. "The Zhou family head is after you because you have Earth origin energy in your body." Niet Dao nodded and said solemnly, "People from a Zhou clan are looking for the essence of Earth." Niet Tian's eyes flickered with eagerness. "Yes." Niet Dao nodded and said, "Searching for Earth origin energy is the destiny of the Zhou family." Niet Tian couldn't suppress the excitement in his eyes. He knew that his guess was correct. The 9 great clans have been sent by the Zhuiying Shrine to search for the 9 origin energies in the 9 domains. "Niet Tian, are you all right?" Niet Dao asked after noticing that something was wrong with Niet Tian's expression. "I'm fine." Niet Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and said, "Grandfather, please continue." He wanted to personally verify this matter from Niet Dao's mouth. Niet Dao frowned, but he continued, "In truth, the 9 great clans weren't from the 9 domains. They came from another world. The ancestors of the 9 great clans came to the 9 domains with their own missions. The Zhou family's mission was to search for Earth origin energy, while the Nie family's mission was to search for light origin energy. The members of the 9 great clans could only return to their original worlds after completing their missions." At this point, Niet Dao couldn't help but smile bitterly. It's a pity that even though the 9 great clans have been in the 9 realms for a very long time, they still haven't found the 9 great origin powers. Eyes trembling, Niet Tian rose to his feet and asked in a trembling voice, "Grandpa, is the world where the 9 great clans used to live called the Land of the Abandoned?" Niet Dao's expression changed when he heard Niet Tian mention the Forsaken Land. He froze for a few seconds before asking, "You know about the Forsaken Land?" Niet Tian nodded heavily, unable to suppress the joy on his face. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, he briefly recounted what he had experienced in the Forsaken Land. After hearing Niet Tian's words, Niet Dao's entire body froze like a wooden statue, unable to react for a long time. He had never imagined that Niet Tian had actually been to the Forsaken Land and had even returned safely from there. He finally knew why Niet Tian's strength had improved so quickly. It turned out that he had been to the Forsaken Land. He finally understood why Jun Aoqing's strength was so terrifying. It was because she was from the Forsaken Land. Niet Tian had just returned from the Forsaken Land, which was something Niet Dao had never expected. After a long while, Niet Dao finally calmed down a little. He looked at Niet Tian with blazing eyes and asked, "What kind of organization is the Vanishing Shadow Temple?" As the patriarch of a Nie family, he knew some secrets. He knew about the Nie family's mission and the existence of the Forsaken Land. But this was the first time he had heard of the Vanishing Shadow Temple. He was very curious as to how terrifying this organization that had sent out the 9 great families was. "I don't know either." Niet Tian shook his head with a bitter smile. I don't know much about the vanishing shadow temple. Nia Dao was taken aback for a moment, then asked, if the vanishing shadow temple is so powerful, why didn't they come looking for the 9 great sources themselves? Why did they send the ancestors of the 9 great families? I don't know. Nia Tian also shook his head. This was also what he was puzzled about. He had seen the power of Shadow Moon Greedy Wolf and Ying Qinyu with his own eyes. If such experts came to the 9 great domains, they would absolutely crush everything. If the vanishing shadow temple was so powerful, why didn't they search for the 9 great sources themselves? Why did they send the 9 great families? Perhaps the vanishing shadow temple had some sort of restriction that prevented them from leaving the abandoned land. To the current Nia Tian, the vanishing shadow temple was a complete mystery. There was not much point in thinking about the vanishing shadow temple now. But Nia Tian really wanted to know why the vanishing shadow temple wanted the 9 great sources. Qingwan has already merged with the beginning light realm. Our Nia family has already found the light origin power, right? Nia Tian said as he glanced at Nia Qingwan. No. Nia Dao shook his head with a bitter smile. The light origin power in Qingwan's body is only a part of the beginning light realm. Furthermore, this portion of light origin was brought out by our ancestor from the Forsaken Land to search for the rest of the light origin. There's a strong connection between the origin energies. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Nia family has been constantly searching for light origin. However, it will be very difficult to find the light element essence. Someone must first fuse with the light element essence, and then form a connection with the other related essences. Qingwan is the second person to successfully fuse with the light origin other than Lord Ancestor. But the strange thing is that after she merged with the light origin, she did not sense the existence of other light origins. So even now, the Nia family has not been able to find light origin. Nia Dao couldn't help but sigh. So that's how it is. Nia Tian nodded slightly. He roughly understood everything. When the Vanishing Shadow Temple had asked the ancestors of the 9 great families to search for the 9 great sources, they must have each given them a small portion of origin power so that they could search for other origins. As far as Nia Tian knew, the darkness origin, the darkness abyss, and the earth origin, the veins of the earth, were scattered and not complete. So it was not surprising that the light origin in Nia Qingwan's body was only a small portion. It seemed like it wouldn't be easy to find the complete 9 great origins. Then Nia Tian became much colder. Grandfather, what does the Nia family's mission have to do with Qingwan's engagement? The ancestors of the Nia family and the Nangong family had an agreement. Nia Dao bitterly smiled and said, if the Nia and Nangong clans both have people who can fuse with origin power, then the 2 of them must be together. Also, the agreement between the 2 ancestors emphasized that as long as someone who can merge with origins appears in the 2 families, regardless of their age or gender, they must be together. This, Nia Tian was stunned, a strange expression on his face. The agreement between the 2 ancestors was too strange. Not only did age not matter, but did they have to be together, even if they were of the same gender? Thinking of this, Nia Tian couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. He was even a little glad that Nangong Ling and Nia Qingwan were a man and a woman. If they were of the same gender, it would be very awkward. Isn't this agreement a little too forceful? Nia Tian turned to look at Nia Qingwan and couldn't help but frown. Nia Dao sighed, his expression ugly. This is the agreement between the 2 ancestors. Even I cannot change it. Nia Tian frowned, not knowing what to say. Chapter 23:54. Nia Tian was startled when he heard the fat cat's voice. He asked, Fat, did you discover something? The fat cat acted as if he hadn't heard Nia Tian's words. He had a strange expression on his face, and his deep blue eyes emitted a strange glow as if he was very excited. Nia Tian felt even more strange when he saw the fat cat's reaction. However, he didn't disturb the fat cat and waited patiently. I know, that must be the case. After a while, the fat cat let out a strange cry, with a rippling smile on his face, as if he had discovered something important. Fat, what do you know? Nia Tian couldn't help but ask again. I know why the two ancestors had such a strange agreement. The fat cat chuckled proudly. Why? Nietion frowned, and his eyes burned with passion. He couldn't understand why the ancestors of the Nye clan and the Nangon clan would have such a strange agreement. If two clans appeared at the same time, they would have to fuse with each other. It would be fine if the two clans were the opposite sex, but what about the same sex? The two ancestors wanted to fuse the two origin forces together. The fat cat's lips curled into a strange smile as he said. Nietion was stunned when he heard the fat cat's words. He was stunned for a long time, unable to understand what the latter meant. Is it hard to understand? The fat cat chuckled when he saw Nietion standing there in daze. Nietion's expression was one of shock. Finally, he came to his senses and asked, Little fatty, are you saying that different kinds of origin power could be fused to form new powers? He tried to explain his understanding, but his face was full of disbelief. He could understand how two origin forces could be fused together. The 9 primordial energies of heaven and earth were forces with different attributes. It was because of their different attributes that they were independent and formed different forms of energy. On the other hand, the origin force was an existence that utilized the attributes of the 9 primordial energies to the extreme. If the two origin forces could fuse, what kind of scene would that be? What kind of attribute would a newly formed energy be, and would it form a new attribute? This was what Nietion couldn't understand. Moreover, he knew that the surrounding space was filled with the power of the 9 elements. If the 9 elements could all fuse with each other, if so, why didn't the 9 primordial energies merge? I'm just saying that the origin forces can fuse with each other. Little fat cat chuckled and said, As for whether or not it will become a new power, I don't know. Nietion was flabbergasted and couldn't utter a word for a long while. Can origin power really merge with one another? Little fat cat's words were too shocking to him, and he needed time to accept it. The origin forces can indeed be fused. I'm very sure of this. Only after Nietion's expression calmed down did the little fat cat continue. The reason why the two ancestors arranged for 2 cultivators who had merged with their origins to fuse with each other was because they wanted their 2 kinds of origin power to fuse with each other. Nietion broke out in a cold sweat, and his whole body was cold. He couldn't imagine what it would be like if 2 men who fused the origin forces were together. But he was very confused. Could 2 martial artists who fuse the origin forces be together, be able to fuse the 2 origin forces? The fat cat saw the confusion in Nietion's heart and said, The origin forces are very sensitive to each other. Even if they are different origin forces, there is still a strong reaction. For example, if 2 martial artists who stay together for a long time, the origin forces between them will be stronger. When the origin forces can sense each other to a certain extent, the 2 origin forces can fuse together. After listening to the fat cat's words, Nietion was even more confused. QL11, he already understood what the fat cat meant. When 2 martial artists were together, they didn't fuse with each other, but they were very close to each other so that the origin forces could sense each other. But he felt that this couldn't work at all, because there were 2 origin forces in his body, the Earth origin force and the Dark origin force. These 2 origin forces were in his body and fused with his devil aura, so they could be said to be the closest. But he could feel that there was no so-called origin force sense between the 2 origin forces, and they were even repelling each other. But he could feel that there was no so-called origin force sense between the 2 origin forces, and they were even repelling each other. Could it be that the 2 origin forces in 2 people's bodies could sense each other just because they were close to each other? Thinking of this, Nietion felt that it was even more impossible. Nietion, the origin force sense between origin forces can't happen overnight. The fat cat knew what Nietion was thinking, and said with a faint smile, and different origin forces of different attributes. The Terra vein source and the heart of darkness in your body, one is Earth origin force, and the other is darkness origin force. The origin force sense between them isn't weak, but it isn't strong either. Generally speaking, the 2 origin forces that restrain each other have the weakest origin force, such as light and darkness, water and fire. And the origin forces with similar attributes have stronger origin forces, such as water, wood, and light and thunder. But even if the two origin forces have stronger origin forces, it will take decades, centuries, or even tens of thousands of years for the origin force to sense each other. The time you fused with the Terra vein source and the heart of darkness is very short, and the two origin forces aren't even familiar with each other. So of course there won't be any origin force sense. When Nyetian heard the fat cat's words, he frowned deeply, a look of shock on his face. It turned out that the origin force sense was so difficult that it would take tens of thousands of years. However, he still didn't understand what would happen after the two origin forces fused. Those two old ancestors definitely wanted the two origin forces to fuse together because they wanted the two origin forces to fuse together. The fat cat smiled and said, "As long as the two cultivators have the patience to stay together for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, it is still possible for the origin forces to fuse together." The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched, and he thought to himself, how loving must two people be for them to stay together for hundreds of thousands of years? It would be fine if it was a man and a woman, but if it was two men who stayed together for hundreds of thousands of years, just thinking about it made him sweat. However, Nyetian now believed that different origin forces could fuse together. However, in the next moment, he thought of another question, and his eyes trembled as he asked in surprise, "Fat, it is like different origin forces can fuse together. Does that mean that all 9 origin forces can be fused? If all 9 origin forces are fused at the same time, what will happen?" When the fat cat heard Nyetian's words, its eyes trembled, and it shook its head in shock, saying, "I don't know." The question of fusing 9 origin forces, it had indeed never crossed its mind. However, what Nyetian said was indeed possible. Chapter 2355. Nyetian, what are you thinking about? Niedao saw Nyetian's surprised expression and couldn't help but ask. "Nothing." Nyetian laughed and said, "Grandpa, I don't think it's impossible to change the agreement made by our ancestors. The agreement was made a long time ago. We can't ruin Qingwan's happiness because of this agreement." Hearing Nyetian's words, Nie Qingwan's beautiful eyes trembled slightly. She clearly didn't expect him to speak up for her. She quickly stepped forward and nodded her head like a rattle drum. "Grandpa, Nyetian is right. That Nangong Lin is obviously not a good person. Even if one dies, she won't be with him." Nie Dao's face was gloomy and very serious. Nie Qingwan was the daughter of his 5th son and his only granddaughter. She was also the only person in the Nie family who had merged with the beginning light realm. He obviously didn't want Nie Qingwan to marry into the Nangong family. But that agreement was made by the two families' ancestors after all. As the Nie family's master, was he going to go against the ancestors' agreement? "Grandpa, the agreement is dead, but people are alive." Nyetian knew what Nie Dao was worried about. He faintly smiled and said, "I think if the ancestors were still alive, they also wouldn't want to see the Nie family's descendants be wronged." Nie Dao was speechless for a moment. He knew what Nyetian said made sense, but some things, if they wanted to break it, they might have to pay a big price. Not to mention that the Nangong family didn't want to see the Nie family break the agreement. Even many people in the Nie family didn't want to break the agreement. As the master of the family, if Nie Dao didn't follow the ancestors' agreement, his position as the master of the family would be shaken. "Grandpa, this matter concerns Qingwan's happiness. The Nie family can't make a decision lightly." Nyetian looked at Nie Dao and said, "Since the people from the Nangong family have already come, let them wait. Just say that Qingwan is still young and the ancestors' agreement can be discussed in a few years." And Nie Dao nodded solemnly, agreeing to Nyetian's suggestion. Nyetian nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. He already knew what the ancestors of the two families were planning. So, of course, he had to stop this so-called agreement. The fat cat had said that even if two people were to be together, it would take thousands of years before the origin connection could be formed. How could he exchange Nie Qingwan's lifetime of happiness for an origin connection that might not necessarily happen? If Nie Qingwan liked Nangong Ling, it would be a different story. However, If Nie Qingwan didn't want to marry him, no one could force her. Most importantly, Nangong Lin was not a good person. Nie Tian felt that Nangong Ling and Lian Jiufeng definitely knew each other. Otherwise, they would not have waited at the Nine Heavens mountain range and ambushed him. When Nie Qingwan saw that Nie Dao actually agreed to postpone fulfilling the ancestor's promise, she couldn't help but be stunned. QL11 after a while, she turned to look at Nie Tian and thought, who is this guy? Why does Grandpa listen to him so much? She was very curious about Nie Tian's true identity and why Nie Dao valued him so much. It seemed that Nie Tian should be her cousin, but she had never seen Nie Tian before. All right, Nie Tian, why have you come a Wind and Cloud Alliance this time? Nie Dao temporarily put aside the matter of Nie Qingwan and looked at Nie Tian. Nie Tian must have come to Wind and Cloud Alliance for something very important that he hadn't mentioned yet. Grandpa, I have come to Wind and Cloud Alliance to ask you for a favor. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said, we are family. No need to be so polite. Nie Dao laughed brightly and said, speak. As long as Grandpa can do it, I will definitely help you. Amen. Nie Tian nodded again and said no more politeness. Grandpa, I want you to let someone go. Let someone go? Who? Nie Dao was stunned. Seeing Nie Tian's serious face, he frowned. Chisha. Nie Tian said a name, his eyes slightly trembling. He had already guessed Chisha's identity, but in order to fulfill his promise, he must let Wind and Cloud Alliance go. More importantly, whether Chisha could be released or not was related to Cher. Nie Tian did not want Cher to forever be a manifestation of the heaven-punishing demon heart. He wanted Shui, to become a real person. Chisha. Hearing this name, Nie Dao's expression changed slightly and said in shock, are you talking about the person who once challenged your father? Yes, that's him. Nie Tian nodded heavily and noticed that Nie Dao's expression had changed. Nie Dao calmed down and said, this person is cruel and bloodthirsty. He is very vicious. When your father fought against him, he almost died in his hands. Why did you let him go? Nie Tian's gaze darkened. He did not expect Chisha to be so terrifying that he almost killed Nie Fenghua. It seemed that it was very difficult for Nie Fenghua to defeat Chisha. The battle back then must have been very tragic. Nie Tian did not hide anything and briefly explained the agreement between him and the Nets and Nets. So you want to fulfill your promise? Nie Dao frowned. His expression did not look good. Grandfather, do you have any difficulties? Nie Tian looked at Nie Dao and asked, Nie Tian, you're late. Nie Dao let out a deep breath and said, back then, Chisha was defeated by your father and was indeed imprisoned in the Wind and Cloud Alliance's storm dungeon. However, not long after he was imprisoned, Chisha tried to escape the dungeon and killed hundreds of guards. In the end, I personally subdued him. After that, I ordered someone to send him to another place. So now, Chisha is no longer in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nie Tian's gaze was already shocked. Chisha is no longer in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nie Dao nodded his head, but did not say where 7 kills was. Grandfather, where is Chisha now? Nie Tian frowned and asked directly. Nie Dao looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but sigh. After a moment of hesitation, he finally said, the Dark Sea Prison. Dark Sea Prison. Nie Tian's gaze trembled and his expression froze when he heard the name. He did not expect Nie Dao to send Chisha to the Dark Sea Prison. Nie Tian had never been to the Dark Sea Prison, but he had heard of it. The Dark Sea Prison was a place to imprison the most ruthless people in the realms. The Dark Sea Prison floated outside the 9 realms and was equivalent to a prison shared by the 9 realms. Some extremely ruthless or difficult to deal with people would usually be sent to the Dark Sea Prison after they were captured. Yi Qinghai had once been imprisoned in the Dark Sea Prison and was the only person to escape from it in the past hundreds of thousands of years. Nie Tian even knew that when Yi Qinghai escaped from the Dark Sea Prison, he had brought others with him, including the Crimson Moon Divine Palace's palace master, Qi Yefeng. He did not expect Nie Dao to send Chisha to the Dark Sea Prison. Things were going to get troublesome. No wonder Nie Dao was hesitant to reveal Chisha's whereabouts. Chapter 2356. Dark Ocean Prison. Niet Tian muttered to himself. His face was gloomy, but his eyes were surging with an indescribable excitement. Niet Tian, you're not really going to the Dark Ocean Prison to save 7 kills, are you? Nie Dao frowned when he saw Nie Tian's expression and asked in surprise. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a faint smile as he said, Grandpa, I've already promised the people from the Heaven and Earth Net that I will release the 7 kills. Since 7 kills is currently imprisoned in the Dark Ocean Prison, I have no other choice but to go there to save him. Nie Dao's eyes trembled. Nie Tian really wanted to go to the Dark Ocean Prison to save someone. The Nets in Nets was an organization that was not weaker than the Holy Parliament. Even the Wind and Cloud Alliance might not be able to go against them. More importantly, Nie Tian had already made a promise. Therefore, he had to go to the Dark Ocean Prison. Nie Tian, the Dark Ocean Prison is one of the most dangerous places in the 9 realms. Even I have never been there. Nie Dao's eyes flickered. He was clearly very worried. Are you really going to, Grandfather? I have no other choice. Before Nie Dao could finish, Nie Tian laughed. His voice was calm, but his eyes were extremely determined. Nie Dao's expression turned ugly. He then thought of something and said, Nie Tian, I know I can't stop you from going to the Dark Ocean Prison, but you can wait. Yi Qinghai was also once imprisoned in the Dark Sea Prison, and he even escaped from it. QL11, I'll immediately send someone to find him. Once I find him, tell him to come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Then you can go to the Dark Ocean Prison with him. How about that? Nie Tian knew that Nie Dao was worried for him, but he smiled bitterly and said, Grandfather, I'm afraid it won't be easy to find Elder Hai. Even if I'm willing to wait, the Nets and Nets may not give me the time. Nie Dao was stunned. He wanted to say something. Bang! However, at this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from outside. Someone has trespassed into the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nie Dao suddenly stood up, releasing his aura like a mad lion. Let's go take a look. He roared, and his figure flashed, rushing out of the Wind and Cloud Palace. Nie Tian and the others came to their senses and immediately followed. At the same time, a violent figure stood high up in the sky above the huge wind cloud square. His eyes were filled with playfulness, and at the same time, he released an extremely strong, evil aura. On the ground of the square, dozens of guards were lying in disorder. They were heavily injured, but they were not dead. These guards were all injured by this violent figure. This person was none other than Lion Jiufeng. Wind and Rain Alliance's guards only have this much strength? How disappointing. Lion Jiufeng smiled coldly. His attitude was extremely arrogant. Trespassing into the Wind and Cloud Alliance. You're courting death. At this moment, several angry roars rang out in unison. Then, 9 black-robed figures appeared and surrounded Lion Jiufeng. These 9 black-clothed cultivators were the 9 Storm Imperial Guards who had previously fought with Nie Tian. Lion Jiufeng swept his gaze across the 9 Storm Imperial Guards and chuckled. He said playfully, Finally, a few decent opponents have arrived. Make your move. He was extremely arrogant as he spoke loudly. You're courting death. The Storm Imperial Guards roared in unison and moved in unison. It was the same method they had used against Nie Tian. 9 gusts of wind swooped down towards Lion Jiufeng like mad dragons. Too weak. Lion Jiufeng sneered and did not even look at them. He thrust out his palm, and a wave of golden flames appeared, instantly turning the space into a sea of fire. Bang! 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 Immediately after, several muffled sounds rang out in the air. The 9 Storm Imperial Guards were sent flying, leaving bloody trails in the air. The 9 guards stabilized themselves, but they were covered in blood. There were several scorching wounds all over their bodies. They had been heavily injured by the golden flames. The 9 of them looked at Lion Jiufeng with trembling eyes. They were extremely terrified. Lion Jiufeng smiled cold and laughed arrogantly. The strongest alliance of the 9 great realms only has this much strength. How disappointing. How dare you behave so atrociously in the Wind and Rain Alliance? You're courting death. But just as he finished speaking, a deep voice resounded. Boom! Then, a huge palm shot towards Lian Jiufeng like a collapsing mountain. It was the leader of the Storm Alliance, Nie Dao. The power of his furious palm was extremely terrifying. If it landed, it would definitely kill Lian Jiufeng instantly. But in that moment of danger, space shook strangely. Boom! A terrifyingly huge palm appeared, blocking Nie Dao's berserk palm, the hand of the Netherworld Emperor. Nie Dao frowned and cried out when he saw the giant hand that had suddenly appeared in the air. The giant hand that had blocked his palm was the hand of the Netherworld Emperor. Alliance leader Nie, long time no see. At this time, a deep voice sounded. A dark figure appeared in the sky and stared darkly at Nie Dao. Tian Kuei. Nie Dao looked at the figure in the sky and immediately shouted the other's name. He never thought that the person who had come was Tian Kuei of the inescapable net. Lian Jiufeng. At this time, Nie Tian's figure arrived. His eyes darkened when he saw Lian Jiufeng. Then his expression turned even uglier when he saw the people on the ground and the 9 bloody storm Imperial Guards. He knew that Lian Jiufeng would come to the Wind and Rain Alliance, but the latter's provocation was a little too arrogant. What he didn't expect was that Tian Kuei would also appear. Tian Kuei's appearance proved that the inescapable net valued 7 kills. It also proved that 7 kills was the killing body of the heaven-punishing demon heart. Tian Kuei, what is the meaning of this? Nie Dao calmed down and suppressed the anger in his heart. Then he asked in a cold tone. Tian Kuei smiled faintly and said, Alliance leader Nie, His Highness was itching for a fight and injured the guards of the Wind and Rain Alliance. Please forgive him. Itching for a fight? Nie Dao's eyes darkened. Then he glanced at the heavily injured guards and said, Tian Kuei, your inescapable net has injured so many people of the Wind and Rain Alliance. Do you think I'll let it go just because you say you're sorry? Tian Kuei smiled again and said, Alliance leader Nie, I've already apologized. What else do you want? Also, His Highness has been very merciful. Otherwise, these guards would have died a long time ago. The fact that they were injured by His Highness only means that they're too weak. They can't blame anyone else. Nie Dao's expression darkened. The suppressed anger in his heart was like a volcano that could erupt at any moment. The Wind and Rain Alliance had never been humiliated like this in its hundreds of thousands of years of existence. Grandfather. It was at this time that Nie Tian walked up and swept his gaze across Tian Kuei and Lian Jiufeng. He said indifferently, forget it. There's no need to lower yourself to the level of 2 mad dogs. Tian Kuei's expression darkened when he heard Nie Tian's words. He said cold, Nie Tian, who are you calling mad dogs? Chapter 2357. Tian Kuei stood in the sky, his eyes dark and murderous. Even his body was trembling slightly. He hadn't thought that Nie Tian would be so arrogant as to call him a mad dog right in front of him. Even Nie Dao wouldn't dare say something like that. But at this moment, Tian Kuei suppressed the anger in his heart. His expression was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. He growled, Nie Dao, if you hadn't sent 7 kills into the Dark Ocean Black Prison, would I have harmed your Wind and Cloud Alliance? Nie Dao's eyes focused in surprise. Tian Kuei already knew that 7 kills had been sent to the Dark Sea Prison. This was something Nie Dao hadn't expected. Nie Tian was also taken aback, and a puzzled expression appeared on his face. So the Nets already knew that 7 kills was no longer in the Wind and Cloud Alliance. He was imprisoned in the Dark Sea Prison. If that was the case, why did Lian Jiufeng let Nie Tian come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance? Wasn't this unnecessary? Nie Tian, I had you come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to meet someone, Tian Kuei said coldly. Nie Tian stilled and asked, meet who? That person is right beside you. Tian Kuei smiled faintly, and then locked his gaze on Nie Qingwan. Nie Qingwan. Nie Tian's eyes focused. Only now did he realize that the nets had sent him back to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to meet Nie Qingwan. But hadn't Lion Jiufeng already seen Nie Qingwan before? Could it be that Nie Qingwan also had some special meaning to the inescapable net? So this girl is the person of the Nie family who has merged with the origin power. Lion Jiufeng looked darkly at Nie Qingwan and said darkly. He had met Nie Qingwan before, but he hadn't noticed her at the time and completely ignored her. If he had known that Nie Qingwan was the person who had merged with the origin power, he wouldn't have let Nie Tian come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. At the time, Lion Jiufeng had almost died at Jun Aoqing's hands. There was no way he would have noticed Nie Qingwan. Tian Kuei, what is the meaning of this? Nie Dao's expression darkened when he saw Tian Kuei and Lion Jiufeng staring at Nie Qingwan at the same time. He asked in a cold tone. It's simple. Tian Kuei smiled coldly and said, the Wind and Cloud Alliance has sent 7 kills to the Dark Ocean Dark Prison. Nie Tian must go there and rescue 7 kills. Moreover, this little girl who has fused with the early light realm must also go with us. Nie Dao, Nie Tan, and Nie Qingwan, the grandfather and granddaughter, were all stunned, and their eyes trembled. It was reasonable for Tian Kuei to send Nie Tian to the Dark Sea Abyss to save 7 kills. But why must he bring Nie Qingwan along? Impossible, Nie Dao growled and said gravely. I will never let Nie Qingwan go to the Dark Sea Black Prison. Nie Dao knew very well how dangerous the Dark Sea Black Prison was. Even a monstrous genius like Nie Tian could easily never return. Nie Qingwan was just a little girl who had not experienced the ways of the world. How could Nie Dao let her go to the Dark Sea Black Prison? Alliance leader Nie, don't be in a hurry to refuse. Tian Kuei had already expected Nie Dao's reaction. He smiled faintly and said, this seat can give you a condition. You will definitely be satisfied. Nie Dao's face darkened, and he said cold, impossible means impossible. Tian Kuei laughed and said, if Miss Nie Qingwan is willing to go to the Dark Sea Black Prison, after she returns, the Nangong family will never mention the marriage to the Nie family again. This condition is tempting enough, right? Nie Dao's aged face suddenly trembled when he heard Tian Kuei's words, his expression shocked. He never imagined that Tian Kuei would know about the marriage between the Nangong family and the Nie family. Moreover, the condition Tian Kuei gave was indeed tempting. Right now, Nangong Duo is very pressing on this marriage matter, making Nie Dao feel extremely pressured. However, Nie Dao did not understand what ability Tian Kuei had to be able to decide the Nangong family's matters. Alliance leader Nie, are you doubting the seat's words? Tian Kuei saw what Nie Dao was thinking and said, this seat is not a good person, but this seat will definitely do what he says. Nie Dao looked at Tian Kuei, his eyes flickered slightly, and he actually started hesitating. I'm willing. But right at this time, Nie Qingwan spoke and agreed to Tian Kuei's suggestion. Nie Dao was stunned for a moment, his face ugly. Nie Qingwan agreed herself. This was something he did not expect. Grandpa, I will protect Qingwan. Nie Tian secretly transmitted his voice to Nie Dao and said with a firm tone. Nie Dao looked at Nie Tian and finally nodded. Tian Kuei personally came and specifically asked Nie Qingwan to follow him into the Dark Sea Black Prison. He was clearly determined to win. If Nie Dao did not agree, most likely Tian Kuei would use forceful methods. Nie Tian did not want to see that scene, so he agreed to Tian Kuei's condition. Nie Tian was very curious in his heart why the inescapable net must let Nie Qingwan participate in this matter. Alliance leader Nie, don't worry. This seat won't let a Nie family member take the risk alone. Tian Kuei smiled faintly when he saw that Nie Dao had finally agreed. He said, His Highness will also go to the Dark Sea Black Prison, and he will bring several powerful helpers. Nie Tian frowned and then looked at Lian Jiufeng. He did not think that Lian Jiufeng would go to the Dark Sea Black Prison with him. In order to save 7 kills, the inescapable net had even put Lian Jiufeng in danger. This meant that 7 kills was even more important than Lien Jiofeng. Nye Tian, you've already met the opponent I arranged for you, right? He will also go with us. Lien Jiofeng looked at Nye Tian, the corner of his mouth twitching, and secretly transmitted. Nye Tian's eyes focused and immediately reacted. A name appeared in his mind, Nangong Lin. It was obvious that the person Lien Jiofeng was talking about was Nangong Lin. Nye Tian's guess was correct. Lien Jiofeng had arranged for Nangong Lin to attack him. Moreover, Nangong Lin would also go to the Dark Sea Black Prison with Nye Tian and the others. At this time, Nye Tian frowned, and his expression became strange. Nye Qingwan had merged with the Light Origin, and Nangong Lin had merged with the Lightning Origin. It was definitely not a coincidence that the inescapable net had arranged for Nye Qingwan and Nangong Lin to go to the Dark Sea Black Prison together. Nye Tian could vaguely feel that the inescapable net was brewing a scheme. QL11, as for what the scheme was, he could not guess for now. Lien Jiofeng, no matter what you want to do, if you dare to harm Nye Qingwan, I will kill you directly. Nye Tian looked at Lien Jiofeng with cold eyes and said solemnly. Nye Tian had to ensure Nye Qingwan's safety during the trip to the Dark Sea Black Prison. Since Alliance Master Nye has agreed, then it is settled. See you in 3 days at Demon Sealing City. Tian Kuei smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Wait, but this time, Nye Tian's voice suddenly sounded. What? Is there something else? Tian Kuei's figure froze, and he turned to look at Nye Tian with a puzzled gaze. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Lord Tian Kuei, you have stated your conditions, but I have not. HM? Tian Kuei stilled, then sneered. Nye Tian, release 7 kills. This is the promise you made to the inescapable net. Do you have the right to state your conditions? The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and he said indifferently, Before I know 7 kills' true identity, I do not have the right to state my conditions. Chapter 2358. Tian Kuei's figure froze in the air. When he heard Nye Tian's words, his eyes shook with shock and surprise. Nye Tian, what do you want to say? Tian Kuei forced himself to calm down and spoke gravely. He was extremely nervous when Nye Tian spoke of 7 kills' true identity. However, he did not believe that Nye Tian truly knew of 7 kills' true identity. Heaven-punishing demon heart. 3 transformations of the demon heart. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said calmly. Tian Kuei's brow furrowed when he heard these words. He froze on the spot. He had originally held onto a sliver of hope that Nye Tian's words were just a bluff. However, the words, heaven-punishing demon heart, 3 transformations of the demon heart, completely obliterated that sliver of hope. It was clear that Nye Tian already knew the truth. 7 kills was the demon heart slaughter physique. Lien Jiofeng looked at Nye Tian, but was not too surprised. Nye Tian had been to the 9-lead demon realm before, so it was not strange that he knew of the heaven-punishing demon heart. With Nye Tian's intelligence, he could guess that 7 kills was the slaughter physique. Nye Tian smiled faintly when he saw Tian Kuei's reaction. He said, Lord Tian Kuei, can I state my conditions now? Tian Kuei's expression was murderous. He forcefully suppressed his anger and squeezed out, Speak. Thank you, Lord Tian Kuei. Nye Tian laughed. Then, his expression turned serious. He said, I will definitely save 7 kills, but I need a promise. After the Nether Emperor is revived, Cher will have nothing to do with the inescapable net and the Nether Emperor. Tian Kuei frowned when he heard Nye Tian's conditions. His gaze was slightly strange as he fell silent. Lord Tian Kuei, are you not willing to agree to my conditions? Nye Tian asked when he saw that Tian Kuei was silent. Tian Kuei's eyes flashed. He said, Nye Tian, since you already know of the heaven-punishing demon heart, you should know the relationship between Her Highness and the Nether Emperor. Once the Netherworld Emperor is resurrected, it's not up to me to decide whether Her Highness can leave. Even if Her Highness is willing to leave, she must obtain the permission of Lord Underworld Emperor. I'm giving you a promise now, but when that day comes, I won't be able to keep it. Are you willing to accept such a promise? Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect Tian Kuei to answer him like this. Indeed, once the Emperor of the Underworld was resurrected, the status of the Heavenly Chief would immediately drop. There were many things that Tian Chief could not decide. All right, I'll lower my requirements, Nie Tian said after some thought. I have to be there when the Underworld Emperor is resurrected. Is that okay? Tian Kuei's gaze turned cold as he looked at Nie Tian with an extremely strange expression. He did not know what the latter wanted to do. Sure, but he didn't hesitate and immediately agreed. Before the resurrection of the Underworld Emperor, Tian Kuei still had an absolute status. When the Underworld Emperor was resurrected, Tian Kuei and the others would definitely be present, so he was not afraid of Nie Tian playing tricks. Very good. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Lord Tian Kuei, it's settled then. Let's meet again at Demon Ceiling City in 3 days. Tian Kuei nodded and left in a flash. Lian Jiufeng glanced at Nie Tian with a strange expression, but he didn't say anything and left. Nie Tian looked in the direction that Tian Kuei and Lian Jiufeng had left with an ugly expression. This trip to the Dark Sea Black Prison was definitely going to be a dangerous one. Nie Tian, are you confident? Nie Dao had calmed down a lot. He looked at Nie Tian and asked, QL 11-inch at this point. Is it even important whether I'm confident or not? Nie Tian smiled bitterly and helplessly. Nie Tian did not know what was inside the Dark Sea Black Prison, but he had to go this time. A while later, Nie Tian and the others returned to the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. Grandfather, where is Rushi? I want to see her. In the main hall, Nie Tian looked at Nie Dao and asked with a burning gaze. In the blink of an eye, he and Mo Rushi had been separated for several years. He missed her very much. He didn't know how strong Mo Rushi was now, and whether their child was doing well. Nie Tian, Miss Rushi is in the Nie family's ancestral grounds right now. I'm afraid you won't make it in time to see her. Nie Dao frowned and said with a troubled expression. Nie Tian's eyes flashed. He exhaled deeply and forced a smile. If that's the case, then forget it. He only needed to know that Mo Rushi was safe. There was no hurry for the two of them to meet. You still have 3 days, Nie Tian. You better take a good rest. I will send someone to send you to Demon Ceiling City in 2 days. Nie Dao nodded slightly and said, All right, Nie Tian said, rising to his feet and preparing to leave. Nie Dao also stood up. The group walked out of the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. At that instant, Nie Dao suddenly glanced into the sky and frowned as if he had discovered something. An expert. Before he could finish his sentence, a black-robed figure appeared in the sky like a phantom. Nie Tian's eyes glistened as he glanced at the black-robed figure with a slightly surprised expression. He could sense that the aura of the person was extremely familiar. However, he could not recall where he had seen the person before. Who are you? What brings you to the Wind and Cloud Alliance? Nie Dao took a step forward and soared into the sky, facing the black-robed figure in the sky. Nie Tian, you're here indeed. However, the black-robed figure did not pay any attention to Nie Dao. His gaze was locked onto Nie Tian's figure as he charged toward Nie Tian. How dare you? Nie Dao let out a furious roar as his aura surged. Grandfather, don't attack. At that moment, Nie Tian's voice suddenly sounded. He instantly arrived beside Nie Dao and signaled him not to be rash. You know him? Nie Dao was startled. He slightly withdrew his aura, but still maintained his vigilance. The black-robed figure was very powerful and was not any weaker than Nie Dao. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. He looked at the black-robed figure and said, Lord Heavenly Venerate Jiuying, it's been a while. Heavenly Venerate Jiuying. The black-robed figure was Heavenly Venerate Jiuying Fenghua. Several years ago, Nie Tian had participated in the Jiuying Forbidden Hunt. He only learned later that the place he went to was the ancestral land of the Chiwu clan, one of the 9 great clans. There, he met Heavenly Venerate Jiuying of the Chiwu clan and even obtained the Darkness Origin Energy, the Heart of Darkness. When he went to see the Holy Mother of Jiuying, it was Heavenly Venerate Jiuying who led the way. Heavenly Venerate Jiuying's status in the sky of Jiuying was second only to the Holy Mother of Jiuying. He did not expect the Heavenly Venerate clan to appear here. Nie Tian, Jiuying Fenghua's expression was extremely grave. His eyes were filled with unconcealable grief. Lord Heavenly Venerate, did something happen? Nie Tian looked at Jiuying Fenghua with a frown and asked in surprise. Nie Tian, the reason I came to find you this time is to give you something, Jiuying Fenghua said in a deep voice. Nie Tian was startled. He had a feeling that something bad was about to happen. Jiuying Fenghua slowly raised his hand, and a black vortex appeared on his palm. Immediately, the surrounding space was enveloped by a terrifying aura of darkness. Soul of darkness. Nie Tian cried out in shock when he saw the black vortex. The black vortex on Jiuying Fenghua's palm was one of the 3 dark subjects of the darkness origin energy, soul of darkness.